If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said trilateral talks between Russia and Ukraine and Abu Dhabi were productive, resulting in an agreement to exchange 314 prisoners. Writing on X, Witkoff said the swap, the first in 5 months, demonstrated that sustained diplomatic engagement was producing tangible results toward ending the war in Ukraine. He added that discussions would continue and that further progress was expected in the coming weeks. The second round of U.S.-backed talks began Wednesday in the United Arab Emirates, and like earlier negotiations in January, had been held behind closed doors. Media reports described the atmosphere as positive, though no details of the discussions were publicly released. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán condemned Ukraine's forced conscription practices after the reported death of Zsolt Raban, a 46-year-old ethnic Hungarian from Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region. Orbán accused Ukrainian draft officers of violently detaining military-aged men as Kyiv struggles to replenish its forces, citing multiple deaths in custody. According to Hungarian officials, Raban was seized from the street despite being previously declared unfit for service due to a lifelong heart condition and later died at a training center near Lviv. Orbán announced Hungary would expel Ukrainian officials responsible for forced conscription and reiterated Budapest's opposition to sending weapons to Ukraine, favoring diplomacy with Russia instead. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk warned that his office is in survival mode due to severe funding shortfalls, prompting a $400 million appeal to sustain operations through 2026. The warning follows remarks from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that the United Nations could run out of cash by July. The United States, the UN's largest contributor, has withheld funding from several agencies, citing accountability concerns. Turk said that cuts have reduced staffing, forced program closures in multiple countries, and weakened the global human rights monitoring system. President Trump's renewed push to secure Greenland for U.S. national security strained relations with European allies ahead of the World Economic Forum in Davos, raising fears of a shifting world order. Tensions eased after the United States and NATO reached a framework deal, with Trump dropping tariff threats and ruling out military action. Experts say Greenland's strategic location, Arctic shipping routes, and rare earth resources have elevated its importance amid competition with China and Russia. They expect several years of geopolitical turbulence, but believe the United States will remain the dominant power in a reconfigured global order. A joint European police operation led to the arrest of 2 dockyard contractors accused of sabotaging German naval vessels at the Blum und Was shipyard in Hamburg. German prosecutors allege a Romanian and a Greek national damaged warships, including pouring abrasive steel shot into the engine of the new corvette Emden, along with other acts such as puncturing water lines and disabling safety systems. Authorities said the sabotage could have caused serious damage or delayed deployments, threatening national security. Investigators have not disclosed a motive, while noting similar sabotage concerns elsewhere in Europe. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing mounting pressure following revelations about former Labour heavyweight Peter Mandelson's past links to Jeffrey Epstein. Reports say Starmer admitted knowing Mandelson maintained contact with Epstein after his conviction, but still supported his appointment as ambassador to Washington.
National relations on one side. I want to make sure this House sees the full documentation, so it will see for itself the extent to which time and time again Mandelson completely misrepresented the extent of his relationship with Epstein and lied throughout the process, including in response to the due diligence.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Right now, somewhere in Nigeria, there's a Christian family being persecuted. Those who are not killed are often forced to flee their homes. At Equipping the Persecuted, they're committed to reaching every affected area and help heal the deep physical and emotional wounds that have been inflicted upon them. But they can't help them without your support. So please visit equippingthepersecuted.org and donate today. Sign up for just $35 a month. It's a little over $1 a day, and you'll help rescue Christians who are suffering and provide security, medical care, food, shelter, and love. The situation is urgent, so I'm asking you to join in the next 10 minutes. It's a life of fear and danger for these Christians, but for just over $1 a day, you can change everything. Go online to equippingthepersecuted.org and make a difference in the life of a persecuted Christian. That's www.equippingthepersecuted.org.
Hi, my name's Michelle Tankey and I'm the volunteer manager at the Lost Dogs Home. We've got 145 incredible volunteers that help us with a wide range of activities, including helping out in the laundry, taking dogs for a walk, doing activities with our enrichment program, administration, gardening, you name it, they're helping us around the shelter. Whether it's blowing bubbles to entertain kittens waiting for adoptions or even taking a dog for a walk, it's such an incredible positive impact on the animals. Volunteers are so important and special to this shelter because they support us in caring for thousands of animals each year. The impact they have enables us to do far more for the animals than we would be able to. For example, we can get on top of the huge amount of laundry we have. So the volunteers allow us to clean thousands more blankets than we could. It's incredible the amount of gifts that we're given by the public. We're so grateful for it. So if we get some toys, we can give them directly to puppies straight away to play with, or towels, we can take them to our vet hospital for them to use immediately. So it's a really important job to help staff with. I would say to someone who's interested in volunteering to please get in touch. We would love to hear from you. We have an application form on our website that you can fill in, so please just detail all your skills and experience you can offer the shelter, and we'll be in touch when a suitable role comes up.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
There we are. We have sound just like that. Welcome to a Friday morning in the UK. At the moment, it's 7 after 6, so get up. You can sleep in tomorrow, maybe you can't. If you're like me, all throughout the week, I want to sleep in. Saturday rocks along, and there I am. I'm up early because I want to be. Anyway, I suppose that's human nature, isn't it? If you're in Australia, New South Wales, Victoria, it's home time. It's 5:08, and in Queensland it's 4:08 at 1928 is that where we're at. Now I'm being quite rude about that, but we can't be rude because we're a very very sunny state. We have universities too, pineapples, all that sort of stuff. So leave us alone. Okay. The House Judiciary Committee Republicans issued an interim report compiling subpoenaed communications alleging the European Commission under Queen Ursula von der Leyen coerced social media platforms into censoring COVID-19 and vaccine content worldwide, affecting US users. Now, the report from 2022-2024, the targeting of anti-migrant views, populist rhetoric, and election-related content ahead of elections and social media platforms in countries such as the Netherlands, Romania, and France, with platforms often complying to dodge massive fines. The EU calls the claims nonsense, but in the States, Republican Jim Jordan labelled it a threat to free speech, which it is. Dr. John Laughland is director of Forum for Democracy International and a lecturer in political science and history at the Catholic Institute of the Vendée in Western France. He was director of the Eurosceptic think tank European Foundation until 2008 and Director of Studies at the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation in Paris until 2018. He worked at the European Parliament from 2018 to 2020. John, thanks for joining us. We don't have you at the moment. We can see a picture, so what I might do is just go to a... Yeah, we can. We have some internet problems. Don't go away, John. We'll fix it up in one...
Our mission at Pets of the Homeless is really simple, and that's to keep vulnerable people and their pets together when they're going through a tough time. Back in 2015, Pets of the Homeless started with a 20-kilo bag of dog food, made it into small packs, put it in a suitcase, and it was just me walking down the streets of Melbourne, one woman on a mission to make a difference. I would share the story on social media.
We've just hit 100,000 meals distributed today.
And the community really responded positively, and it just grew from there.
My name is Kent, and this is Hippo. She's everything to me. She's such a good girl. I got her at a time when I wasn't very stable. I'd come out of prison, I was homeless, but as soon as I got her, I just realised, oh my God, I can't let this dog go. And she's just my best friend. Hippo had a canine equivalent of an ACL injury. I knew there was something really desperately wrong. It was agonising seeing her suffering. My caseworker put me in touch with Pets of the Homeless, and Yvonne said that they could help, and I was just so overjoyed. I wouldn't have been able to get through that medical incident without their help. Like, it just would have been impossible.
That bond between us and our pet is very important, and when someone is going through a really tough time in their life, that bond becomes even more important, and that's what we're trying to protect at Pets of the Homeless.
Who's that?
My favourite quote is, "I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realised I was somebody." My intention wasn't to actually start a charity. It was to help. It was just putting one foot in front of another, and that's how we got to where we are today. We're now in a warehouse. We have about 150 volunteers. We provide on average about 60 to 70,000 meals every single month. We have a network of about 73 community partner organisations that we work with. We've also taken in hundreds of pets into our foster care program, and we've just reached 2.5 million meals distributed.
In the time that I've been volunteering with Pets of the Homeless, I've seen the community grow, numbers of volunteers, pet food packing, got a brand new van, and we can reach more community pantries and reach more people. The community, whether it's the volunteers who are packing the food, who are foster caring, they've got so much love to give.
I think Pets of the Homeless gives people hope. There can be a bit of judgment for people who are homeless and have a dog, but the reality is those dogs have got love and support, and it's so wonderful that Pets of the Homeless are able to help. It really makes a big difference in actual lives. It's really important work.
To the people who have supported Pets of the Homeless over the last 10 years, thank you from the bottom of my heart. There's so many kind people out there, and I'm just grateful for all of them. The work that we need to do is so huge and the need is growing, and we can't do it without the support of our community.
The climate right now is no warmer than it's been many times throughout history. Our baseline is now the lowest that carbon dioxide has been in 600 million years. As far as temperature change, the IPCC's first report of 1992 showed that the medieval warm period was warmer than the present. Well, this didn't fit the narrative, so by the time the 1996 report came out, it was a completely contrived graph called the hockey stick. So what they did was they got rid of the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age, and so instead of the graph doing this, they flattened it out, and then they added instrumental record on the end that looks like it's going way up. The point is that the people that are calling them out on it are not getting the media coverage. You know, because look, at this point there's billions of dollars going into the whole climate change narrative.
A hoax about carbon dioxide in the climate has caused a global energy and economic disaster. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And we're back. I feel like I've been laying on that the walkway behind me, and trucks have been running over me. John, are we there? We're there. Hello, John. How are you? No, we have no sound at the moment.
You can hear me now.
We can, yes, we can indeed. It's Friday, so anything that will go wrong will go wrong for sure. Tell me, for more than a year, the committee has been warning that European censorship laws, this is the Judiciary Committee in the States, that they threaten US free speech online. Now, proof, big tech says censoring American speech in the US, including true information to comply with Europe's far-reaching Digital Services Act. What are your thoughts?
So this is, I'm very glad you've asked me on, because until this year, I used to give lectures in Paris University on democracy and the media. And funnily enough, my lectures were stopped and replaced by another much more neutral subject, because what I said was deemed to be too controversial by some of the students. And I'm therefore relishing the opportunity to now say it on a much bigger platform. Basically, this problem, which the US House of Representatives Judicial Committee has identified, is a very old problem. This is not new. I'm very pleased that they've put it in their report and that they've drawn attention to it. But it's been going on for at least a decade, as indeed they themselves say. And I expect you remember, Mike, and our viewers probably will too, that just after the Trump administration took office, so about basically a year ago, J.D. Vance went to Munich, to the Munich Security Conference, and gave a very strong speech, a very strongly worded speech, in which he accused Europe of stifling free speech. And this House committee report, this Judicial Committee report, is basically the continuation of that. The fact is that many of the things which the committee has identified, I also, and no doubt many others, identified some years ago. And in particular, for example, the thing that they point out, the most important thing they point out, is that the policing of speech, which is very, very proactive in Europe, is exclusively directed against, let's say, conservative or right-wing or skeptical opinion. And we can see this not only in the Digital Services Act, which is the legislative instrument, the hard power instrument that they use to force internet platforms, social networks, to moderate their content in the desired direction. But we can see it also in the way that agencies within the European Union report on what they call disinformation. There's a thing called the European Media Digital Observatory, which has been reporting and monitoring media, particularly during election time. And this is, of course, what the committee report has picked up, and claiming to find examples of disinformation. Well, guess what? The disinformation is always the stuff you've mentioned. So anything that's skeptical about COVID, anything that's skeptical about immigration, any kind of what they call populist message, and so on. And this is the bias is absolutely blatant. In other words, basically what they are doing, to put it very simply, is leaning on these networks, on these social platforms, to prevent people from, for example, complaining about immigration or complaining about COVID restrictions or whatever. In other words, systematically to impose a politically correct, left of center, pro-European, pro-establishment speech. And this, once again, I can't emphasize enough how deep this is and how long it's been going on. The problem is that it's not just the European Commission that does this. Unfortunately, there's a whole network in Europe of national and, yes, European bodies doing this stuff. And when I talk about national bodies, I'm talking about the intelligence services, the security services, because they're up to it in their neck as well. I'm not sure if I don't think the committee report goes into this angle of it, but national intelligence agencies, national security services, in Britain, for example, Britain's not in the EU anymore, but Britain is very similar. In the Netherlands, and I imagine in most of the other countries, they are involved in this policing of the internet. So to give you one example, during COVID, the head of the British Army, this was only a few weeks after Britain left the EU, so it was just continuing, if you like, as it had done before, and as I expect many other countries do too. The head of the British Army, back in April 2020, boasted about how his special operations, his psychological operations unit, Brigade 77, was basically not just policing, but also influencing the internet to remove what he called disinformation about COVID. In the Netherlands, a couple of years ago, the Dutch secret services described as a security threat any speech which tended to promote distrust in government. Can you believe it? So if you distrust the government, according to this AIVD report, which is the Dutch Secret Service, you are a security threat to the Dutch state. So this stuff has gone very, very, very deep indeed. And I'm obviously very pleased that the committee has found it and has obviously been working on it for a year. But I'm afraid we're a long way from getting out of it, because only on Tuesday, today's Friday, only on Tuesday in Paris, where I live, the French police raided the offices of X, of formerly Twitter. They've called in Elon Musk for questioning, and the head of X in France. And of course, the European Commission on the European level is trying to impose a 120 million euro fine on X. So unfortunately, they're going full steam ahead.
What would that be for, John, the $120 million fine? Would that
for
be
not doing what they want, which is to moderate speech in the direction that I've just described. That's what the Digital Services Act does. It claims its goal is to combat disinformation. That's the label that they put on it. And what they want these internet platforms to do, these social networks to do, is to proactively prevent or at least downgrade, shadow ban or whatever, certain kinds of speech. And that obviously depends on the algorithms. That's why the police raided the X on Tuesday, because they allege, their allegation is, I'm sure, I don't believe it for a minute, but what they will say is that X is promoting, that Elon Musk is promoting, this or that line of political debate on immigration or whatever, and they want him to do the opposite. They want him to take down stuff which doesn't fit the party line. And they did this, by the way, for years, long before Musk took over X. The whole Twitter files thing. When Musk bought X a couple of years ago, he published these famous Twitter files, which lots of people have worked on. What these files show, and this, by the way, is an important point, that the American government leaned for many years very, very heavily on Twitter to police its content. When I say very heavily, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of messages from the FBI going to Twitter every week, literally nearly 700 or 800 interventions by the American authorities every week. So a gigantic amount of government interference. And I think it's important to say for our viewers that this whole, what people have called the censorship industrial complex, which involves, yes, things like the Digital Services Act and the equivalent acts in America, but also a whole galaxy of NGOs, of disinformation centers in universities, and on and on and on. This censorship industrial complex was set up in 2016 by the Americans. It started in America. Now, the House Judicial Committee, of course, is writing about Europe, and maybe they've dismantled it in America. Certainly Trump promised to do that. But the origins of this are American. The Europeans, of course, were very happy to follow. But the origins of it lie in an act which Obama passed in the last days of his office in December, the last days of his time in office in December 2016. So the election was in November 2016, which Trump won. He passed a Disinformation and Foreign Propaganda Act, which basically set up what then became this censorship industrial complex. Because when Trump was elected and when Brexit happened in June 2016, these people panicked and they thought, oh my God, the people are not voting as they're supposed to vote. They're voting against all the things we believe in. This is dangerous. This is a national security threat, and so on. And they set up this apparatus, which I repeat, includes the security services. So we have, a sort of KGB style situation where the security services are involved and where dissident discourse, I repeat, is regarded as a security threat. This, as I say, all started in America, but of course has indeed been implemented very energetically in Europe. And unlike in Europe, we haven't got an administration as they have in America, which is trying to undo it all.
Yeah, I just want to just mention the representative, senior politician. His name just escapes me at the moment. He was in Australia and had a joint press conference and went through a whole bunch of things that that Australia would like to be more connected to Europe. Von der Leyen's coming out here to say some nice things and not mean them, of course. And then we have one of our representatives, Petey Wong in Australia, said that we have the same values as Germany does, which worries the hell out of me, and especially around the mis and disinformation bit. And we know that Germany, along with a great part of Europe, is embracing free speech. No, it's not free speech. Should we be worried in Australia? Just as a bit of a sidebar here, do you think we should be worried in Australia with the coziness of us and Europe? Because Europe is no leader in most things that are good.
Well, I'm not familiar with the status of free speech in Australia, but I would have thought, yes, I think Australia should be very worried. Australia, after all, is deeply embedded in the famous Five Eyes, security arrangements, which it shares with Britain, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States. So the security services of Australia, the intelligence services, are deeply embedded with the same ones who are at the origin of this, because I repeat, it's an American origin thing. And as we know from COVID, the Australian regime was one of the most vicious, one of the most repressive, like Canada and like Britain, and of course, like many countries in Europe. So unfortunately, yes, I think Australia probably is a candidate for this kind of internet policing and this kind of censorship. I just can't. You know far better than me, Mike, how it actually works in your country. I'm not informed about that, but yeah, I would have thought culturally, the whole sort of liberal consensus, the sort of left liberal, politically correct consensus, it seems to me, is probably prevalent in Australia, just as it is all over the, let's say, Western world, what we call the Western world.
Well, in Australia, we have this, it's the E-Safety Commissioner, and her job was to bring in this, any child 16 and under, you are not allowed to go onto any social media. You can't do it. And they will you're blocked and that sort of stuff. By the way, they all worked a way around it. So the parents helped.
Yeah, but they're trying to do that in France. It's exactly what they're trying to do in France.
And Spain.
Yeah, but I mean, it's absolutely outrageous, because if you have to be over 15 or whatever to go onto the social networks, that means that you have to prove your identity when you go onto a social network.
Right.
And that obviously means it's nothing to do with that being under 15. It means policing everybody who ever goes onto any social network, because their ID will be logged, and that what they watch or what they say on those networks will obviously be monitored. So I'm very upset to hear that that's true in Australia, although I'm not entirely surprised.
No, we're very closely tied with China, so we're embracing their free speech mantra at the same time, which has very little in many cases. Tell me, how do we break this desire from the EU and many other countries around the world to shut you up. And that, in fact, in New South Wales, in Australia, the Premier there, Chris Minns, who I lovingly refer to as Chairman Minns, has said that no one has any, unless you have permission or you're afforded to by the government, you are not allowed to have free speech. The government will decide what you can say and what you can't say, and that's what he said. I mean, that's deplorable. And if it's happening in Australia, I mean, we had a terrible record with COVID, of course, but it doesn't augur well for the rest of the world.
Yeah, but again, we know all this, Mike. I mean, we all remember Jacinda Ardern saying, "We will be your single source of truth." That's what the whole Digital Services Act is, that there are trusted sources of media. That's what they're setting up in Europe and in France and all over the place. So they will give a blue tick or whatever to basically government sources of information, government-approved sources of information. And we know, you and I know, I think I know, that government is the primary source of disinformation. We're just in Britain going through an absolutely psychedelic moment where the Epstein business is being blamed on Russia, which, you know, you have to have such levels of cognitive dissonance to believe that one just basically despairs at humankind's critical faculties. You ask how to get out of it. You actually, you've partly given the answer in your earlier question when you said that this is being done in Australia by a safety officer. What we have to do is attack the problem at its root, which is that this whole issue of free speech now for at least a decade, certainly in Europe, has been discussed in the context of security. We have to cut the root. We have to cut this problem at its root. Free speech is not a security threat. It is not a danger. It is not a problem to the state. It doesn't threaten the state if people say things that the government doesn't like. On the contrary, free speech and free inquiry and open discussion is the way to get to truth. That's how we learned things about COVID. That's how we found out that the vaccines didn't do all they were supposed to do and maybe did things they weren't supposed to do, etc., etc., etc. It's precisely by having, if you like, an apparently chaotic platform where people can more or less say what they want, that we get to the truth. It's a public good. It's absolutely not a threat, and certainly not a security threat. So we have to dismantle. And actually, before he took office, Trump gave a short. He did a series of short videos explaining what he was going to do once he took power, and he gave one about this very subject, standing between two American flags and saying, "We're going to cut all federal funding to all these disinformation agencies and so on." So that's what I would do. I would start first of all by, if I were in power, I would try to make sure that the security services have absolutely no role in free speech issues, that the whole notion that disinformation is a security threat is cancelled, is stopped. And of course, very importantly as well, that any financing to agencies, whether they're government agencies or whether they are ostensibly private, which happens all over the place because a lot of this stuff is outsourced to universities. There are disinformation analysis centers in hundreds of universities, but of course, really, they're just doing the government's work for them. That's the kind of funding that has to be simply cut. These things have to be closed down. So that's the way to go about it. Unfortunately, it requires a very high level of political will and lucidity about the problem.
And with the, at least within Australia, and having lived in the US a little bit different than Australia, we spell Australia the same way you spell apathy. And then they go, how did that happen? Oh, well, it's terrible. And all these terrible things are happening. And then they ask the question, how did that happen? I mean, it's because you took no notice of it. Look, we have run out of time, and I apologise for the hiccup at the start. So perhaps we can continue this maybe sometime next week, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Because I think it's an
important subject.
Yeah, and I think it deserves more than 15, 20 minutes. John, if somebody wants to find out more about you or the Forum for Democracy International, How do they do that?
Thank you. So Forum for Democracy is a Dutch political party, and indeed I run the international part of it. And we have a website, FVD, so V is because we've used the Dutch acronym FVD International, all one word, fvdinternational.com. And we also, of course, have a an X feed, which is FVD_INTL, Forum for Democracy. Thank you very much for asking me to give that.
Yep, our pleasure. And being a Friday, I always ask my guests, what do you have planned for the weekend?
It's currently pouring with rain in the west of France. I'm going to go back to Paris later on today and possibly to our country house. We're lucky to have a country house on the banks of the Loire, about 2 hours from Paris. So I hope I'll go there.
And you'll have a glass of red, I would imagine.
Well, I may have red, but the white is also very famous. We live next to Sancerre, which maybe you've heard of. A lot of the wines, not in Australia, but in New Zealand, have been planted by wine growers from Sancerre.
If you hear a knock on the door, don't open it. It's me. John, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much, Mike. Okay.
This is The World Today.
Makers are facing more travel.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. Nice background, by the way, for those who know music, which David Richards does. It's from Abbey Road, isn't it? I think it is. What a magnificent picture, and sort of brings back, I mean, I'm not that old, David is. He can recall those days. He's chortling in the background. Now, this week we spoke to UK-based Dr Clare Craig about the decline in medical ethics. Dr David Richards is an Australian physician, the best, scientist and systems theorist whose career bridges medicine, mathematics, and the study of complex adaptive systems. David is also co-founder of Australians for Science and Freedom and a general practitioner and, of course, an adjunct professor at an Australian university in the Faculty of Medicine. David, thanks for joining us. By the way, I've got to ask you this question. We had John Laughland on just before, and he's going to whiz down to his country home and sip some wine. You know that I like my whiskey. Which is better for you, by the way, whiskey or wine? I need to know from a man of your standing.
Wine is definitely superior, Mike. The French have great longevity. And the Scots, of course, are unfortunately one of the countries with one of the highest mortality rates from heart disease. And unfortunately, Scotch is not as good as a beautiful bottle of French wine.
Well, it was lovely chatting to you, David, and
right, you too, as always.
Terrible, terrible news. I don't. I believe you.
Yeah, I know. Just look, you got to have your treats. You got to have your treats, Mike.
I think it's cleaner than wine. I end up sneezing after a few bottles, no, a few glasses of wine. After one glass, sometimes, especially red, whether it's the histamines, but I start sneezing and I annoy everybody, including the cats. We talked about Dr. Clare Craig and her video, and she was reminiscing on what it was once like to be a doctor. And you had ethics, and nowadays ethics is not really part of the whole medical profession or agenda. What's your views on that?
Well, I don't think it's the doctors that are at fault. I think that Claire's a very smart lady. She's a very smart cookie, and I think there is a crisis in ethics, but I think that crisis has come about because of the structure that doctors now have to operate within. So let me go back a few years, Mike. One of the things that I remember from my early career, back in the Jurassic period, as it were, the hospitals were run by the matrons, and the matrons, or each ward had its own matron, and the matrons were absolutely fantastic. They kept a really tight ship. Everybody respected them, and they knew how to organize their departments. And then what happened, I was back in the NHS, back in the UK at the time, what happened was the matrons were replaced by managers. And that's when the rot started, because these managers came from industry. They had no concept of how to run medical services. And basically the standards, everyone feared the matron. Not out of not out of the sense that they're bullying, but you respected their authority. But when the managers came over, they basically had no idea what was going on. And I know it's quite a privilege working in the health service back then, because many of much of my training was done face to face with some of the great specialists in London at the time who had worked on the post-war period, had enormous experience in the field. And it was a great privilege to get a medical background in that way. But over the years, what's happened is that that face-to-face education has disappeared from the core curriculum. More and more of it comes now in the university classroom, and there's no substitute for learning on the job, as it were. From people who have got vast experience. People who are operating in universities, may be very well versed in their subjects, but they don't have the hands-on skills that are required to operate effectively as a doctor. And of course, they borrow very heavily from what's termed the evidence-based medicine approach. Now, evidence-based medicine sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It sounds like a great idea. But unfortunately, the evidence comes largely from drug companies, because drug companies are the ones who can afford to do studies expensive enough, have the money to do the studies that demanded these days to procure the evidence. And so much of the information comes from drug companies. It's biased, and what we've seen is an erosion of independence as far as the doctors are concerned, in terms of the way that they operate, and they're having to follow these guidelines, which are basically a one-fits-all kind of guidelines. So you don't treat the picture in front of you. You follow a manuscript. I mean, to be perfectly frank, it diminishes the doctor to the role of a technician. And that's got worse in the last decade because of the implementation of AI systems within the health sector, and this has led to an absolute disaster because the problem is that AI, as it operates in the healthcare system today, is optimized for what's termed resource allocation. Now, that's just a euphemism for cost cutting, basically. And every year, the system has to save more money, and as a result of that, more and more things get cut from the budget, with the result that basically things that should be done and were operationally essential are now being marginalized more and more, and as a result of that, quality of care is diminishing. And a very simple fix to this would be for AI to be optimized instead of resource allocation or cost cutting, if it was re-optimized for health optimization, for patient outcome. And even though the initial costs might be higher, in the long term, there would be genuine savings because it would lead to increased health standards all around, and increased productivity. And I've done the analysis on this, as you say. I'm a systems analyst in that sense, and it shows that if you optimize AI to optimization of health, then the rewards follow. And so, while I see where Claire is coming from, and I respect her point of view. She's a very intelligent individual. At the same time, I think sometimes there's a blurring of what's actually going on, because in that sense, there are constraints on the way doctors can operate, and that in turn can translate through to an appearance of a lack of ethics. However, I feel that most people who go into healthcare, most people who want to be doctors, majority of them genuinely want to do it because they want to do some good, and I think that they're trapped in a system, it's not of their own making.
I'm just thinking though, and I'm not doubting that probably the vast majority of these the students and the people who want to be doctors, they have the right intentions at heart. But what about the administration? And they're the ones and so we're talking about, if you look at APRA, for example, I'm not going to put you in the have your foot dangling in acid or the volcano at the moment. I'll spare you that pain. But
very thoughtful,
but they're an indication of an organisation or a directive from a government or a government-related body on how doctors should act. And if you look at COVID and stuff, the doctor had many of their responsibilities, and the decision makings were just erased. And it was, as you said, there's almost like a one size fits all. How do we fix it? And let's not look at the individuals. Let's look at the organisations that determine how you operate.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there, Mike. Exactly what you said is absolutely true. These organizations are self-serving organizations, so they're given a budget from government to prosecute their mandates, and of course, at the end of the day, what their funding depends on is reporting to government. So what's optimized is not patient welfare or citizen welfare, but what's optimized is the survival of the organization, and we've seen that in APRA and other organizations, other bureaucracies, and these are self-serving systems that basically become erosive over time and take away freedom of speech, take away the debate. At the end of the day, medicine is scientifically based, and science depends upon discussion and argument. And we're going to have difference of opinion. Doesn't mean that I'm right or the next person's right, but the only way we can improve what we do is by having a frank and open discussion about that. And that's something I've experienced in my medical forums throughout my career. Some of the decisions, some of the medical people can be quite terse. They can be very, very challenging, and that's how we operated. And now, of course, we've got this politically correct system coming in and being imposed upon us, where nothing can be discussed, nothing can be debated, and it is a malignancy that's creating enormous damage to healthcare in this country, not just to healthcare, but to the trust that the patients have in their doctors, because they realize, I think patients are waking up to the fact that doctors are becoming less and less free agents, because they are controlled by these organizations. Having said that, there is light on the horizon, because Understeiner, I think Understeiner's name, the CEO of APRA, has just come out recently acknowledging the harm that's been done by APRA, and saying that things have to change. That was a dramatic statement, a big statement, and we'll see how this pans out. But last year as well, the Complexity Commission reported on the operations of APRA and other regulatory organizations, and they were damning in terms of the way that these organizations are operating. So what you're saying is absolutely true. It's a major, major problem for Australia, and unless it's addressed adroitly, then patient welfare is going to suffer. But I do sense that we are turning a corner.
Interesting that Bill Gates was out here. I'm not too sure if he's gone back now. And one of the things that came out before he got here, that he contacted a disease from a Russian hooker, basically. But anyway, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy, umpire and everything. But anyway, he was saying that to Albanese, who's going, yes, 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 nodding his head like those little bobbing dogs on dashboards. Yes, 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 yes. And he was saying, yes, yes. Sorry, I stopped that bit. He was inviting Albanese to agree with him to that, and he did, yes, yes, about putting all these surveillance cameras everywhere for the next pandemic, because what we're going to do, we're going to make sure we can see everything that is happening. So under the guise of, Nurse Gates, I mean, anyway, he's now advising on medical in some ways in Australia. But we're going to have, and because you're a co-founder of Australians for Science and Freedom, this must have rung some big bells for you. The thought of Bill Gates telling Anthony Albanese, yes, 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 that we need more surveillance, more cameras for the next pandemic. What's your views on that? First of all, is the next pandemic predetermined already?
Well, good question. Well, we all know that Bill Gates knows everything about everything.
He does, and everything.
He does. There is nothing that man doesn't know. It's just that the rest of the world doesn't follow what he thinks should happen. But that's the problem. No, it's interesting. I did an analysis, my deductive entropy program, as you know, which is the best predictive algorithm in the world. I'll make a little plug there, Mike. Looked at what were the biggest threats to future, to survival for the human race. And it came up with not pandemics. It came up with engineered pandemics as the biggest threat to human survival. And look, I think my background is immunology and human genetics. That was my degree, and I think that there's been a lot of misinformation about the threat of global pandemics. I mean, basically, when we look back at any of those pandemics, even the so-called COVID pandemic, if we accept the absolute narrative from Bill Gates and from the World Health Organization that the global pandemic was a disaster for humanity. Well, the truth of the matter is that 99% of people under the age of 65 survived the so-called pandemic, and the reality is that for any infectious disease, it relies on the vast majority of the people affected by the infection surviving the infection. Otherwise, it cannot spread. And so the idea that some virus is going to come along and wipe out the human race, well, humans have been going on for quite a few thousand years so far, without healthcare, without modern interventions, and here we are, we're still here. So the science says that the probability that a major global pandemic is going to come out and wipe out human civilization. This has come from Bill Gates's narratives and so forth. And I think that people who are very experienced in public health, like Jay Bhattacharya and so forth, they're perfectly aware that these kind of scenarios are more scripted from Hollywood than they are from the annals of scientific literature. So it is deeply concerning. And of course, recently I went down to Canberra as part of the Australians for Science and Freedom to campaign against the implementation of the World Health Organization directive, which the new pandemic, the International Health Agreement, which we signed up for, and basically this means that the WHO can announce a pandemic whenever they want to, whenever they see it appropriate. Of course, let's face it, the WHO have not had a good track record on this point. These decisions are going to be made in Switzerland at the WHO headquarters, and if the WHO says there is a pandemic, well, there is a pandemic, and as a result of that, Australia has to fall in line and follow the directives. And this is going to cost us. This is going to cost the Australian taxpayers about $5 billion a year, which is substantial. And the costs for this are going to come out of monies that would otherwise gone to the prevention of heart disease and cancer. So each taxpayer is paying the WHO now. So is going to be paying the WHO somewhere between $5 and $6 billion a year, or say all taxpayers, I should say, and that's going to come from taxpayers' money, and very lucrative for the WHO. But what does it really do for the average Australian?
Well, it makes us even poorer. But I see that the federal government is selling off all these military bases, hope to raise $2 billion. Not a whole lot. And when you're having to sell military bases, it says that the government really is running out of money. Just quickly, because you're going to hang around, by the way, we believe, thank you so much for that, for the Protagonist. Some people have said that maybe it's the procrastinators. I'm not too sure about that one. And I'm very disappointed, by the way, that you slurred Scotch. I mean, it's very... Normally after we drink it, we slur, but you did it prior. Look, just quickly, I need to get off that because I will get into trouble, and you're one of those that get me into trouble, let me tell you. The Nipah virus, is that going to be, because I mean, I was watching the thread, and it's similar to what they did with COVID, little stories here and there. Then the fear of mortality popped in, and it was 75% fatality rate. The Asian all the Asian airports and stuff, they had screenings again for the Nipah virus. You've got about a minute to fill us in to tell me that I will live a bit longer and enjoy my Scotch, and I won't be eradicated by the Nipah virus.
Well, any disease which has a mortality rate at that level is going to not propagate very quickly through populations. Basically, I mean, one of the most successful, if you like, if we use that term, diseases globally in terms of infectious diseases is malaria. And the effect and the reason why malaria affects so many people is that only 1% of people who get malaria die, and so most people are carriers of malaria. And of course, when they carry malaria, they can carry the malaria to the next person. Now, if something kills the person quickly, then there's very little opportunity for transmission, and so the organism doesn't propagate through populations very quickly at all.
Okay. Now, quickly, if somebody wants to find out more about Australians for Science and Freedom or yourself, how do they do that?
Well, our organisation, Australians for Science and Freedom, is a website, scienceandfreedom.org. We have annual meetings online if people want to join, and we have a presence on X, and we have a presence on Facebook as well. So we would welcome anyone to come along, and they'll be most welcome. And as far as I'm concerned, I've just published my new book, Mike, Deductive Entropy. Deductive entropy, it's if I say so myself, it's the best predictive algorithm in the world. If anybody wants to work out what's going on, that's the way to go.
We must get you on down the track, not too far down the track, and talk about it. Nothing like
delighted. Be delighted.
Dr. David Richards, who will be hanging around for, because the accent, he knows a bit about the UK, and singing in Wales and that sort of stuff, and slurring Scotch, which is a terrible thing to do. David Richards, thank you very much. You'll be with us again after the news. This is The World Today.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. An inquest into the April 2024 mass stabbing at Sydney's Westfield Bondi Junction found that attacker Joe Cauchi was schizophrenic, likely psychotic, and had been using cannabis for days before killing 6 people and injuring 10 others. Cauchi, who was later fatally shot by police, had been taken off medication in 2019. While his psychiatrist did not err initially, the coroner found she failed to adequately monitor his deterioration despite warning signs. Cannabis use likely worsened his condition. The inquest recommended reviews of psychiatric care guidelines, public safety awareness campaigns, and bravery awards for those who intervened. Russia and Ukraine have carried out their latest prisoner exchange, with each side receiving 157 captured troops, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. The exchange also secured the release of 3 civilians abducted by Ukrainian forces during their incursion into Russia's Kursk region. The deal was earlier announced by U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, who said it was finalized during Washington-backed talks between Moscow and Kyiv and Abu Dhabi. Russian officials highlighted the mediating role played by the United Arab Emirates. Witkoff said the swap underscored how sustained diplomacy is delivering tangible results, though participants acknowledged that while progress was made, no major peace breakthrough was reached. Top congressional Democrats issued more than 40 demands during negotiations over the Department of Homeland Security's 2026 budget, seeking major limits on immigration and customs enforcement operations. The proposals include requiring ICE officers to display identification, restricting arrests without judicial warrants, barring enforcement at so-called sensitive locations, and expanding oversight by state and local officials. The demands were released by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who said the measures would protect constitutional rights. Critics argued the proposals would significantly weaken immigration enforcement as negotiations continue. Spain's left-wing coalition government under Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has published details of its migrant amnesty scheme, revealing that illegal migrants will be allowed to self-declare that they have no criminal record if official documentation from their home countries is not received within 1 month. The program could regularize more than 500,000 migrants and excludes only those convicted of crimes other than illegal entry. Police sources warn the system could be exploited and may increase crime. Authorities have also reported a pull effect, with migrants from other EU countries traveling to Spain to seek residency permits. Prime Minister Keir Starmer publicly apologized for appointing Peter Mandelson as ambassador, despite knowing of his continued relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, saying he had been misled and regretted the decision.
I want to make sure this House sees the full documentation so it will see for itself the extent to which time and time again Mandelson completely misrepresented the extent of his relationship with Epstein and lied throughout the process, including in response to the due diligence.
Nigel Farage has unveiled former Conservative Council leader Dan Thomas as Reform UK's leader in Wales ahead of the Mayo Santiv elections. Thomas, who led Barnett Council from 2019 to 2022, defected to Reform last year and has returned to Wales after decades in London. Farage described him as battle-hardened and experienced in managing budgets.
Like so many, sadly, young people from Wales headed off to London for a career in which he did well. He also went on to be a cabinet member of the council in Barnet and the leader of Barnet Council for some years. So we have somebody here from the valleys, somebody here with considerable business experience, but somebody who knows what it is to run big budgets.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Everyone has a reason. It could be good grub, your liquid gold, or more golden years. For someone you know, for parents you don't, or because 1 in 3 of us will need blood in our lifetime. For every reason to become a donor, there's an even bigger reason: life.
Nothing here, and imagine coming in here and you've got a child to bring in as well. Imagine trying to make it home for them, because they got to share it as well, and this is an imprint for their future. So you can see what this place is like. We wander across in my room. As you can see, there's very little space. His bed to make him comfortable, pictures on the walls. That's my own cupboard I had to bring in. Well, it's Friday night. It's almost 11 o'clock. There's been a major row or something like that occurring in the other end of the block. I've got nowhere to go to, so I'm here with my son. This weekend, there was a little bit of aggravation. Okay, a lot of shouting and things like that, right? How did that make you feel?
A bit annoyed.
Why did it make you annoyed?
Because of shouting, bad words and stuff.
I really need to get out of this place.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today and the Protagonists. Big question. I mean, the Epstein fiasco, I mean, the files and everything, it's just terrible, isn't it? Is Keir Starmer finished? He was visibly shaken at the dispatch box yesterday, and it's clear Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador, incredible, did not follow due process. in spite of concerns from the bureaucracy. With the obvious risks, one wonders why Mandelson was Starmer's choice for the role in the first place. How important was Petey in getting things done? Now a police investigation is underway about the leaking cabinet decisions. And while this is a convenient way of closing down debate, the findings will be politically charged, even more than they are now. The Met Police, hello, have issued a statement urging the government to avoid publishing specific documents relating to Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson so not to undermine their investigations. So what of the Labor Party? Drowning in controversy and community hatred. Does the government have a chance to reset without its most toxic leader? I think so. Is there anyone who can replace Starmer? Our panel today is Dr. David Richards, and a physician, scientist and co-founder of Australians for Science and Freedom, and William Clouston, leader of the Social Democratic Party. And our third guest, we hopefully will be along with us very shortly, so we're just going to change a few things around, and hopefully this will all work now, because we're one guest short at the moment, so let's just try this one out. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. David, your observances across that very large ditch, is the Labor Party finished?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, we're in for some enormous political upheaval. Obviously, what we're seeing is that the major parties in the United Kingdom, much as we're seeing in Australia with the major parties in Australia, are starting to fragment, and we're starting to see other groups, Nigel Farage's party in the UK, and of course what we're seeing in Australia is Pauline Hanson's party garnering more and more support in Australia, and this promises to be I think a period of major realignment in terms of the political landscape in both countries and other countries around the world as well. And God knows which direction this is going to go in, because at the moment, I don't think it's I think what we've witnessed in the UK is one leader after another being undermined and being replaced. Listened with interest to some of Liz Truss's statements about what's been, how she felt when she was deposed as Prime Minister, and the influences on the politicians that were coming outside of politics. And I think that what we're seeing is that the system, which has been operating for a very long time, Westminster system, very successful, is starting to age. And I think that, I think in the UK and I think in Australia, it's time that we had a frank discussion about, what politics is going to look like into the future. One of the things I've been talking about in Australians for Science and Freedom is our sovereignty of our nation. And what we've seen systematically in the last decade is an undermining of our national sovereignty and our national identity. It's almost obscene to be talking about, the history of our countries, how we came to be successful. That's a subject that's taboo, and yet these are the very things that bring a country together, a peoples together, is the national identity, and along with that, the protection of our sovereignty is I think the biggest challenge facing both countries and other countries in the West.
William Clouston, thanks for joining us again. Do you think the Labor Party is finished? And the reason why I say that, once upon a time there were the Tories. They're gone. Let's all move over to Tories number 2. And now we have the Labor Party. If you've never seen cannibals eat each other, and egged on by the good folk of the UK. This is it. You need to watch. Are the Labor Party finished?
Probably not, alas. I think they look. We have a two-party system, and it's been historically very, very resilient to challenger parties. So it's far too early, in my opinion, to say that it changes for good, or to change it for good, you need a change to the electoral system, and that would open it up. You'd probably have a 5 or 6 party system if that were the case. But it's certainly in bigger trouble. The Labour Party is in far bigger trouble than the Tories, and I've predicted this for some time. It's partly linked to their very large majority, but on quite a relatively low popular vote. And they've been clueless, literally, on gaining office. None of the plans on the big questions are working, on housing, on energy, or industrialization, trade, criminal justice. Nothing works. And they have no answers to it. And I followed Keir Starmer for many years, actually before he was Labour leader and on becoming Labour leader, and he'd never said anything on the important material matters on these things, as I say, housing, trade, industry, economics. He'd never said anything that was vaguely interesting. I don't think he was particularly interested in it. He's a human rights lawyer. He's interested in process, and he's got nothing to offer. So they're failing. I mean, you could replace Starmer, and most of the fundamental problems would remain. The problem is, Mike, they're on the wrong side of the argument in policy terms, and actually instinctively they're on the wrong side of history. I mean, these are progressive liberals who have been, their type of politician has been in charge for 30, 40 years actually across the West. And it's a bit like, I do think it's reminiscent of late stage Soviet empire. You've got someone like Starmer in Downing Street. He's sort of clinging on, but the public have had enough of the type of policies which he represents: open borders, mass immigration, and the points being made by David on sovereignty, national sovereignty. He doesn't believe in national sovereignty. When we had a vote in 2016 to leave the European Union, Starmer did everything he could to undermine the vote, everything he could. So we can discuss what happens next, because he's clearly toast. He's on the way out. Timing, probably he could hang on until the May elections, but he's going to go after May because the results are going to be disastrous. We can talk about who might take over, but I don't think it would make very much difference to the position and the direction of the Labour Party in government.
While you're there, William, who would replace him?
Well, it depends whether you look at the odds, the betting odds, or something about the Labour Party. So the betting odds say Angela Rayner top, and then Wes Streeting, and in third place Ed Miliband and Shamana Mahmood after that, and various other people. My money's on Ed Miliband. Angela Rayner has, some people like Angela Rayner, but she has difficulties paying the right amount of tax on her housing transactions. I think she'd be an utter disaster. She's not intellectually able to be Prime Minister, would be useless. Quite popular in the Labour Party, but I don't think facing forward, I don't think she'd be successful at all. Wes Streeting is actually quite popular on the right of the party. But you've got to remember that most of the PLP, the parliamentary party, are not right-wing. They're sort of left-wing progressives and don't really like him very much. And Ed Miliband is actually popular among them, and critically, he's popular among the membership who actually vote. So if you look at Labour list, he regularly tops that. Now, he's disastrous among his political opponents, but he's a popular man amongst the key electorate, which is the Labour Party and the people that can vote in the election. So I think Miliband probably is the one that takes over. I would probably say after May, I think Starmer is quite stubborn. He probably stays on until then. But who knows? But either way, it won't solve the fundamental problems, because there's no leader in that race that is in touch with reality, I think.
David, what do you think?
Well, look, I think I tend to agree. I think that his days are numbered. I mean, he's upset so many people. What we've seen from other political parties, like the Conservative parties, is that once the leader's in trouble, the knives are out. And I do think that Ed Miliband would be a safe pair of hands in the sense that he's been there for a long time and got very very experienced. But very much as William has said, I can't see anything changing. I think that they straitjacketed. I mean, they from afar, from here, they've spoke this woke agenda for so long now. They've straitjacketed themselves into this politically correct narrow groupthink that is so self-destructive, and they don't have the intellectual capital to be able to move in any other kind of direction. I think that they're hostage to their own misfortune.
William, what will be the trigger? It's a terrible word to use about Starmer because there are many that would like to do that with the trigger. But what would be the trigger to remove Starmer?
Well, there are two routes really. He can resign and throw in the towel. Possibly that might happen after key revelations on the Epstein Mandelson affair. That could happen. The Parliament will get its hands on a lot of information, a lot of internal information, and there's talk this morning of them getting access to WhatsApp messages right back to the general election. So that would be very interesting indeed. I mean, I think he's done for anyway, because I think Kemi Badenoch in Parliament didn't actually skewer him on getting the key admission. The key admission is that Starmer appointed Mandelson knowing that he had an ongoing relationship with Epstein. Right? Let's just go over that again. He appointed Mandelson to the key diplomatic job in the world for the UK, knowing that he had an ongoing relationship with this man. That is appalling judgment. That is, in any world at all, that is absolutely atrocious judgment, and he should go. And a lot of people in the UK are asking, did any key party have something on Starmer? Because it's such a bizarre decision, very, very odd thing to happen. So that should be enough, and that should, and it's quite possible over the next few weeks, because it probably is 2 weeks they're talking about, to get key information out into the public domain. There could be something that's absolutely damning, that even he says, okay, the game's up and we throw in the towel. But if it's not that, the next hurdle is the May elections. The May elections throughout the UK, on those elections that are taking place, because the government are actually postponed quite a few local elections, but there are plenty of them throughout the country. There's the Scottish Parliament elections and the Welsh Senate elections. Now, in Wales, Labour has been in control since the start of the Senate, so it's a major thing if they don't run that. They have no chance of winning that election. Plaid Cymru, the Nationalist Party, is coming up. Reform UK is coming up. So they will lose control of that. And that for Starmer could be devastating. But they'll do appallingly badly in these elections, losing councillors up and down the country. So that's the next trigger. And I think that could trigger a challenge internally in the Labour Party. But they have their own processes about getting nominations to challenge the leadership. And you've got to see who does that. As I say, my front runner is Miliband, but he's saying he has led the Labour Party. He's done that. He's not willing to do it. But I don't really believe him. I think he'd love to do it.
Would you believe a politician? I mean, you are one, sorry. But I'm just thinking that. Oh, I don't want it. Oh, I did it for the king and country.
Yeah.
What about David? What about the style of government? Will they continue under the current agenda, or do you think with a new leader you would have new policies and a new agenda?
To tell you the truth, Mike, I think it'll be like changing the deck chairs on the Titanic. I think that I think that the trouble is the leadership now is of the Labour Party. Well, the Labour Party has moved so much to the left from afar, looking from afar, from where I see it. Labour Party has moved so much far to the left that it's natural. The natural constituents now are expecting the extremely woke, extremely extreme ideology, which is really completely bankrupt of any kind of ideas. And it's hard to see how they can escape from that because they've boxed themselves in. It would take someone of immense courage and honesty to front up, to change the course, the direction. And it's hard to see that happening. I mean, history is against it. What we've seen is a tendency to become the movement of the Labour Party over time is to become more and more authoritarian, more and more sort of, dare I say, communist-like, and it would take a huge reversal of the ship to really fix the problems. I think the problem is they're heading in the wrong direction, and do they have a person of enough courage to speak out and say, we've made a mistake? I mean, that's what's required.
What do you think, Bill? William, what do you think?
I think, I mean, it's interesting actually. David mentions the Labour Party's gone to left wing. I don't think that's right. I think it's not left wing in the economic sense, and that's a problem for people like me, because some of the things that it should be doing, like building, some housing, or reindustrializing, or owning and running, providing grid power for the energy system, it doesn't do. It's not interested in doing. The problem with the Labour Party ever since Blair is that it's sort of neoliberal, liberal party. It's basically an awful combination of sort of progressive ideology, as you say. They're all woke, and a preference for international structures rather than national structures. But all the sort of red meat, the concrete things, the material things that someone might want. They might want a decent national railway system or something. They're not interested in that, and they have no proposals to change any of that. So, what you do, the problem with Labour is a bit like the Tories under Johnson. You have comms and PR and slogans. That seems to have replaced planning and effective government, good governance. And it's everywhere. You see it. I spend, three trips a month in London and SW1. You see it everywhere. That's how they think about politics. So I'll give you a couple of examples that your listeners will be interested in. So Australia solved its unsolicited arrivals problem under Howard, in the famous election. We will decide who comes here and under what circumstances. And you do offshore processing. That works. In the UK, we have an open border on the south coast. Tens of thousands of people rock up. These people will be fiscally negative to us, massively costly to the society. We can't stop them. One of the reasons we can't stop them is that neither government is prepared, Labour or Tories, to get out of the international architecture which prevents you from having border control. They just don't have the bottle because they're all liberals. And so you get slogans, and Boris Johnson had a slogan, the Rwanda scheme, and that was a publicity stunt, didn't work. And Starmer had a slogan, smash the gangs. Previously the Tories said stop the boats, now it's smash the gangs. But a slogan isn't actually going to solve the problem. What would solve the problem is a policy to get out of that legal international framework and deport people to Ascension Island. The flow would stop tomorrow, but they don't want to do it. So I'm afraid a slogan is not going to solve the material issue. And you see this everywhere. I mean, in housing, which is a key area I know something about, Steve Richards, the present housing minister, is keen on build baby build. Steve Reed, sorry, build baby build. That's his slogan, but it won't solve anything because he has no capacity. There's no plan to increase capacity in house building, in state house building. There's no plan at all. They don't want to do it, and so nothing will happen. The house price situation will continue to be beyond the reach of many young people, in particular a bit like Australia. Mass immigration will continue, and the slogan won't work. So I'm afraid we're just not governed by competent people.
What about I'll stay with you for a second, William. What about you mentioned, the usual ones. I won't put my hand up. I'm not going to put my hand up. But are there any, like, sleepers? and I couldn't imagine anyone being at the Labor Party being asleep. But any other people or candidates that are bubbling under that could be, for example, Starmer goes, so instead of going for the usual one, let's go to someone brand new with a fresh outlook, a bit of a redirection, a bit of a rejig with the direction of the party. Do you see anyone sort of bobbing away just beneath the elite ones of the Labor Party, someone that might be worth having a go with and could be the new look of the Labor Party? Because if they don't do something dramatically, I mean, we often talk about Nigel, but reform is still looking pretty good. But 3.5 years is a long time to go, and who knows what's going to happen with the Epstein files. But so, do you see anyone who could possibly, be that sleeper that leaps to the defence of the party and leads them out of the swamp?
No, I don't see any. I see. I mean, my friends in the Labour Party are in a sort of an organisation called Blue Labour. You have Lord Glassman, who's very, very good. He's their sort of intellectual leader. And you have people like Paul Embry, one or two MPs, probably about 10 MPs in the Blue Labour group. And they're very sensible, not dissimilar to our politics, really. And they're our friends. But no, none of them are prominent enough to challenge. The one person that we haven't mentioned, who gets mentioned a lot, is the Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham. Now, there's presently a by-election in Manchester, and he wanted to be a candidate in that, and Starmer stopped him. And that tells you something about how scared Starmer is of Andy Burnham. Now, Andy Burnham would certainly be a better leader in terms of political warmth. He's much more likable, better communicator, and so on. But he hasn't got a seat, so he can't do a lot about that. He can't do a lot about that if he's not in Parliament. And I see no immediate prospect of a route back in for him. So that's the difficulty. The other difficulty, because I know a little bit about the Labour Party, the other difficulty he has is that he's far too right wing for most of them. So he wouldn't be, he's not particularly liked among the PLP or the membership. So that's a problem. But I don't know. I would say, I just float this idea to you. It is a hell of a long time, to the next election, 3.5 years. There's a lot to happen. Reform are ahead in the polls. They're sort of roughly 30%, 29-30%. Tories are down at 18, and the Labour Party are at 18. And you have these other two, you have the Green Party and the Lib Dems hovering around mid-teens, low teens. So that's the picture. History says the Tories recover. I mean, I'm sorry to disappoint people who want to see it differently. In a way, I do. I want to see it differently. But history says the Tories recover. And Kemi Badenoch has done a lot better recently in Parliament, and that doesn't always transfer to popular votes. Most people don't watch it, but she is doing better. And the other warning for a reform is, and Nigel Farage, my party had a national electoral pact with Reform at the last election. It's just a minor pact. It was 22 seats we agreed not to fight each other on. I don't think Reform will do that again with any other party. We were the first in, and probably the only ones that did that with them. Although we disagreed about economics, we thought it was a good idea, and it was a benefit. But I think Reform, again, if they're going to win the next election, they probably have to be doing even better than they are. The historically acute among you will know that the STP in 1982 polled 52% in the polls, and at the election, a year and a half later, with the Lib Dems, we polled 25% in the actual election. So a lot of people are saying, the historians and psephologists are saying, that Reform actually has to be doing a lot better than it is if it's on target to win a general election. And I think that's probably true. And there's also the prospect that you get some horrible sort of woke progressive coalition involving Labour, Lib Dems, SNP and Plaid, just to stop them. And that could happen as well. So I think, on the sensible side of politics, we've got to get our ducks in a row for 2029 and make sure that doesn't happen.
It's interesting. And then you have to make sure you have the turnout. And Labour are very good at, off you go. It's a bit like the Salvos. Out they go. And then back to the pub. Something like that anyway. So what about, David, what do you think about this? Do you think that you think reform, for example, will have a chance? My opinion, I have to be honest here, is that I think Nigel Farage is a celebrity game show host in waiting, and I have no confidence in Nigel because it just doesn't ring true. There's something that it's like, do I have a deal for you? David, what do you think?
Well, if I can just pick up on something William said, so I didn't put myself across very well before. When I talked about the Labour Party becoming more and more communist, I was really talking about their authoritarian stance on things, and the fact that they've been moving to a more and more centralized system. They you know, as William rightly pointed out, they've moved away a little bit from the social democratic roots, if you like, in respect of social justice. But it's the authoritarianism that's quite disturbing. Aldous Huxley. I saw Aldous Huxley being interviewed by Mike Wallace back in the late 1950s, and he warned about this move towards increasing authoritarianism and centralization, which has been quite pernicious and so destructive for freedoms and liberties in certainly in Australia and other Western countries. But coming back to Nigel Farage, well, I was in Chicago in 2015, and my then wife said to me that Donald Trump was going to be campaigning for the Republican Party, and I said to her, "Oh, look, he's a game show host; he'll never make it." And lo and behold, there he is. And so, politics has moved from intellectual debate and so forth. So we're moving into a period where people are so easily swayed by personalities on televisions and cheap tricks and so forth. And so I wouldn't be so sure. I do think there's something more fundamental going on with politics. I think that I understand what William's saying about the history that the two-party system has been survived for over 100 years now, but I think that old coalitions are breaking up. Much of that time was the post-war consensus, and we look at what's happening with on the global level with the establishment of BRICS and so forth. I think we're going through a period of extreme rapid change and instability, and I think it's quite possible a personality like Nigel Farage will take to the ascendancy, because it seems to be a popularity vote these days rather than common sense that determines the outcomes of these things.
What about could the Australia, the wrong one, sorry, could the Labor Party, could they abandon some of their much hated policies, such as asylum seekers, justice, censorship, surveillance, and the list goes on? What do you think, William? Can they actually do that? Is it possible to, if they abandon, and I don't see that happening, by the way, but if they were to abandon that, would it put them in a better position than they're at the moment?
It would, but I agree with you. I think they're just wedded to it. Their whole belief system depends on this, and I think it's a bit like, David mentions Huxley, but it's a bit like the old card-carrying communists. I mean, liberal progressives are liberal progressives, and the selection systems for both parties, but Labour Party particularly, has selected for these views, and Starmer has these views, and Cooper has these views. They all have these views. They're all even on the wins that we've had, against some of this ideology on things like trans ideology. They were on the wrong side of that, and they fought it tooth and nail. So no, I think I don't think there's any prospect that they change. And also the other thing is, there's a big difference between politicians saying something and believing it, and so it's obvious. But they wouldn't be taken seriously anyway if they suddenly had a reality check. I mean, the Home Secretary used to wear T-shirts saying "refugees welcome," and now she's going to Ethiopia this week and investing large amounts of taxpayers' money to try and prevent people from making the trip and arriving as migrants. So they're all over the place. But I don't think that will do it. I think, again, David mentions Nigel Farage. I mean, he's pretty clear about his instincts. I mean, most people know, I think his instincts are more in line with most people's basic ideas, but there are one or two problems for him politically. I mean, the biggest one, as I mentioned, is that reform appear to have quite a relatively low ceiling in that, they're bumping up on 30% and they can't seem to get beyond that. And that is a problem. You might have 30% of the public wholeheartedly support them, but unless you can break out into new territory, they're sort of range bound there. And they also have, one or two problems themselves with proposals and politics and their own policies. I mean, it's clear that, reform. Nigel Farage's Richard Tice have clear ideas on migration and immigration, which I basically share. But on economics and trade, it's difficult to know what they actually want. It's not. I joke sometimes when I'm speaking to people that I don't know what reform's policy on international trade is, because I don't think they know what it is. My policy is more Trumpian and Vancian. I think we need to protect our industry. I think it's protect or perish, and Australia should think that way as well. But I think I don't know what Nigel's view on it is, and unless these things are resolved, it's going to be unclear for the electorate.
William, just on that, China and the UK seem to have, they're getting closer and closer. And we have the super embassy, and they aren't very far away from sensitive data via the pipes that go very close to the super embassy. You have Chagos, you have a wonderful visit to Beijing. There seems to be a lot more China-centric being brought in here. What's your views on that?
Well, politicians across the West can't avoid China in the sense that if any of them bother go down to Walmart or Kmart in your case, or wherever, or Asda and all the products on the shelves are Chinese. So the level of industrial dominance that we've got from China, which has emerged after they were brought into the WTO, which some people think is just a disastrous mistake, demonstrates the reliance we have industrially. It's just absolutely astonishing. And as I say, a whole generation of Western politicians, the liberals, particularly the free trade liberals, have just been indifferent to what is made where and by whom, and indifferent to who owns what. So the amount of Chinese ownership and foreign ownership in British industry is a problem. We seem to be willing to sell off key industrial assets to foreign owners without any problem at all, just for the short-term buck. So whether you like it or not, whatever a politician says, the way we are in terms of industrial products is that virtually the whole world is reliant on China. So they don't. When you think about it, when you speak to people in think tanks and China experts, they'll tell you that there's in the immediate term, in the short term, there's very little you can do to avoid very, very strong reliance on China, and that's where Starmer is. I mean, he's gone over there. It was a fairly pathetic trip in terms of the announcements that were made, and they were puny. There was pretty much nothing there. But I think there has to be a reality check on national resilience and Chinese influence, and there has to be a reality check on the fundamentals, the things that are really nationally sensitive, like your energy supply. And it seems crazy. I mean, what I'm about to say is true. Ed Miliband and all the net zero people, all the people that are very keen on renewables. Renewables don't really work, do they? Because they're intermittent. So you need a proper system as well as a renewable system if you have that. But all of that, all the wind farms and all the solar farms, are all a way of basically subcontracting our energy system to the Chinese, which is obviously utterly insane. No sane government would do that, but that's what they're doing. and it illustrates the problem that we have. Until you get people elected that can actually think, what is secure? Can we produce our own energy system through nuclear? I would go through nuclear and oil and gas, so we actually get resilience. You're not going to get any change, but they're totally in hock to this and think it's like sort of hello clouds, hello sky, it'll be fine. Well, I'm not sure it will be fine.
No, I don't think so either. David, what do you think?
Well, I agree completely with William. I think one of the most significant things for Australia is our energy policies. We've gone down this crazy route of renewables, and unfortunately, I think many of the politicians are scientifically illiterate in terms of, in terms of the understanding how this is going to pan out. One of the things I'm articulating as part of Australians for Science and Freedom is a nuclear policy for Australia. I mean, we've got massive amounts of uranium. We have the major uranium reserves in Australia at this stage. We're mad not to be using it. We should, it's a biggest crime our politicians are creating against this generation and future generations is not instigating the implementation of nuclear weapons and nuclear power, I should say. And we could have small scale nuclear reactors up and running in about 10 years, enough to power several stations. I'm actually also very optimistic that in the near future that nuclear fusion becomes a reality as well. And Australia is really well placed in that sense, because we are one of the major producers or the major resources for lithium worldwide as well. So I think that this is key, for my part. Energy security is key to is the single most important factor in securing sovereign protection into the future. And any country that doesn't look after its energy reserves is going to become, find it very difficult to secure its own agenda.
Yeah, I just, William, I've got to, because we had a conversation with David prior to this on another show, and he was telling me that whiskey is not very good for you, and not as good as wine. China has agreed to cut tariffs on whiskey from 10% to 5%. That's worth a lot of money, 250 million quid. But I find that I just found it very interesting that they would focus on whiskey. Can you fill me in on why this was decided on, and is it more important than I would imagine?
It's not particularly important. I mean, it's not. Look, this is the problem with the tokenism. It's like a little biscuit from the Chinese Communist Party. Here you go. No, look, if you speak to the Scotch whisky producers, the American market is by far the biggest and most important. And the Chinese market has actually suffered recently in the last few years in terms of Scotch whisky sales because of lack of consumer confidence. The Chinese savings rate is very high, and they have major problems with oversupply of residential property, and they've got a festering debt problem with property. And so the whiskey sales in China have fallen a great deal anyway. And every time, it's like the argument I make on tariffs. The currency fluctuation between sterling and the Chinese currency is bigger than that anyway. 10%, a drop from 10 to 5 is helpful, but it's not particularly significant. It really isn't. But just to reiterate the problem, the point that David made about energy security, this is the issue. You for the whole of industry, you can't industrialize, you can't keep what industry you have unless you have abundant, reliable, cheap energy. And Australia should be, as you say, it should be out there, out in the front in terms of nuclear. And even, the gas, the LNG that you export is cheaper than the price that you can use it domestically in Australia, which seems mad to me. It's the same problem. You need is a generation of politicians that actually are prepared to put the country first. And we don't seem to have that, which is a real pity. But the energy win in Australia is there for the taking. Take it for goodness sake. But I wouldn't do small ones, David. I would do big. great big ones. So speak to Westinghouse or the Koreans, get some big stuff. You need about 8 or 9 or 10 for the same as. All you need is a few. You'd probably need, in Australia, you probably need something like 40 gigawatts of power from nuclear would do you.
Before we get into sorry, David, I thought I'd just what do you drink, by the way? William, are you a whiskey man?
I'm not actually. I'm mainly Scottish, and my mother's MacDonald from Edinburgh, my father's family from Orkney originally, and the Acadians produce two wonderful scotches, Highland Park and Scapa. can't stand the stuff. It gives you a very good high whiskey. It's quite different to normal alcohol. Strange, you're very happy on it. But no, I don't really like spirits in total. I'm a red wine drinker and a beer drinker.
I was going to use you to back me up from before with David. I shall put that aside and work on another plan of attack later on. What do you think, David, on what William has said, though?
Well, look, I agree, William. Ultimately, we want big nuclear stations, but one of the arguments in Australia that has resisted or people put up against the introduction of nuclear power plants is that the time scales it's going to take several decades to implement, and that's true, but at the same time, as an interim measure, if we started with small scale nuclear reactors, that would be a beginning. I'm actually one of the things I've done over the last few years. I've been working on a platform called Detective Entropy, which looks at is sort of a predictive algorithm, and I'm actually trying to put together a consortium to try to explore the possibility of developing fusion reactors, which I think is we're starting to get to that level of technology at the moment. And again, Australia is so well placed to be a world leader in nuclear fusion science. It's going to take some decades, but ultimately that's where we need to be looking at. And if we want to secure the future for our children and our grandchildren, these are the really important things that we have to be dealing with right now.
One of the things that have brought to our attention on how grubby governments can be, and this is the Epstein dealings. Can I ask you, William, were you surprised that Mandelson was so involved? And Nigel Farage has said there's going to be other names coming out. Got to be careful here. Some have suggested that Nigel's name might come out. Now, whether you've done anything wrong or not, just the association with Epstein, it's it can probably determine whether you have a long career or not. How damaging was Lord Mandelson's dalliances and connections with Epstein? And you look at not just the hanky-panky that went on, but security-wise, he was sharing private or very confidential information, government confidential information, to other parties. The alarm bells must be ringing very, very loud at the moment.
Yeah, funnily enough, I wasn't surprised at Mandelson because he has a history of cozying up to the rich, and he's in that world. He wants to be in that world. He made no secret of it. In terms of his behaviour, I think when he was business secretary after the GFC, it's in the public realm. I'm not saying anything that's not it's not even questioned. When he was business secretary, he leaked information about the euro currency bailout to Epstein prior to that happening. Now we'll wait and see what the courts say if he goes to court, if he actually gets charged. But under the Act, Section 52 of the Act, insider dealing doesn't require you to benefit personally. It doesn't. You don't have to have evidence that you cashed out on it. the key test is whether the information that you gave was specific enough and whether it was market sensitive. And if those two tests are made, Mandelson could be looking at 7 years in jail for insider trading. But it gets beyond that. There were other things that, there was a NatWest asset that he managed to pitch to Epstein, and eventually JP Morgan bought it. So there's lots of things like that. But if you have a minister of state and they're acting against your interests as a country, and you're basically giving information for very possibly private gain, because he obtained favors after that. He obtained resources, and his husband obtained resources from Epstein after he did these things. It's rather like state capture. That's what it's like. It's like being run by people that do not have the interests of you, your citizens, and your country at heart, and they're basically slicing and dicing it and selling it off. And whether it's in Australia or the States, I mean, I have differences with Trump on some things, and I prefer Vance to Trump, actually. But he's right about a lot of things. And one of the things he's right about is a lot of Western nations need to step up to the mark and actually put their citizens and their nations first. He's right about that. But when you've got people in government at the highest levels, people like Mandelson, who is basically giving information out and doing things which are not in the interest of your nation, it's very, very problematic. And that's what needs rooting out. We need to just have people that actually are prepared to back us and not be enthralled to these financiers. It's a disgrace.
Mm. Yeah, whether it's Australia or whether it's the UK, parts of Europe, and many would say the entirety of Europe, but the trust that I suppose the disclosure of people's how they actually work, the grubbiness, and you have government doing all sorts of terrible things. Then you have the personal, such as Mandelson, for example, with Epstein, and then you have other names being brought up. Tony Blair was brought up, his name, and many of the redacted pages were mentioned that they kept out all the juicy bits, but my thoughts are that they actually kept out many of the parts that involved other countries and the information that has been disclosed to those countries, which will then contravene many secrets acts of many countries. So, and I'll start with you, David, first of all. The Epstein basically dump all the information. Where do you see it heading? I mean, how do you see the English or the British government, the British government in the UK, how do you see them getting out of this? And do you think they ever will, but do you think other politicians, whether you're the Conservatives or whether you're Labor, the stench, it's like a skunk, it's going to stick to you, and then nobody wants to go near you because you have this stench of mistrust and being a basic slug. What do you think?
Well, I was very interested in Whitney Webb's books on One Nation Under Blackmail. Her books were very interesting. I haven't read both volumes yet in its entirety, but it's a very dense read. I mean, as an amazing person. I mean, how she puts all this stuff together is extraordinary. But what she showed was that Epstein was emerged from a system of corruption that was been going on for best part of most of the 20th century, and really started developed after the Second World War with the CIA. And central to those policies was to try to engage politicians in unsavory behavior in order to be able to blackmail them, to exert political influence over them. And it's extraordinary. Her narrative is just being sort of put out into reality. And so I think there's the details on this are very clear. Reading Whitney Webb's books, extraordinary piece of work. And this reaches far and deeper. Obviously, certainly within America, but now we're seeing this this spread to the UK and other countries as well. I mean, there are a few people mentioned in Australia as well. So I think this has got an awful long way to run, and I'm not sure where it's going to end. It's going to, a lot of people are going to be cleaned out. Whether this leads to any fundamental change or not. I do remember Peter Mandelson when I was in the UK. He was known as the Prince of Darkness. It's quite an ironic title now, isn't it? With what's happened.
Yep, certainly is. And you have the final word, William. We have just about to hit time. What's your thoughts? I mean,
no, I think that's spot on. I think what's happened if you're in the pub with someone and that's with a sane person, any sane person can see this is straight out of a John Le Carre novel, spy novel. What it's about is compromising your target. Once you've compromised them, you have them. And I think that's what's happened, actually. And sadly, we need to rid ourselves of this somehow.
Yeah, and your terrible legacy media. It's the Russians. They're behind all. I mean, truly. I have. Anyway.
No one listens to it anymore. Actually, that's the thing, Mike. It's not worth it. It's a parody now, the legacy media. It's a joke, to be honest.
It is. And you watch, the BBC will do a 10-part series. Anyway, I've got to thank you both for joining me. Thank you very much, Dr. David Richards, physician, scientist, and co-founder of Australians for Science and Freedom. If somebody wants to find out more about you or the organisation, David, how do they do that?
Our organisation's on the web. We're Australians for Science Freedom.org, and you can buy my book on Amazon, Detective Entropy. I can't even remember what the full title is now. Detective Entropy. That's enough.
That's all right. You need a scotch. And William, if somebody wants to find out more about you or the Social Democratic Party.
Well, I'm William Clouston on X. You can follow me there, or you can go to the party website, which is sdp.org.uk. And actually, a tip for your viewers: in 4 hours' time, the SDP announces its new national immigration policy, which is revised, and it's got a very interesting idea in it on a red list, which you might be interested in for Australia. I tip it for you. Take it.
We need to get you on next week to talk about that. So Jen will be, she'll call you our time at about 2 a.m, and your time it'll be just perfect.
Great stuff. Thank you. Take care, guys.
Thank you very much. This has been the Protagonists. Coming up next, the world today. If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said trilateral talks between Russia and Ukraine and Abu Dhabi were productive, resulting in an agreement to exchange 314 prisoners. Writing on X, Witkoff said the swap, the first in 5 months, demonstrated that sustained diplomatic engagement was producing tangible results toward ending the war in Ukraine. He added that discussions would continue and that further progress was expected in the coming weeks. The second round of U.S.-backed talks began Wednesday in the United Arab Emirates, and like earlier negotiations in January, had been held behind closed doors. Media reports described the atmosphere as positive, though no details of the discussions were publicly released. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban condemned Ukraine's forced conscription practices after the reported death of Zsolt Ruban, a 46-year-old ethnic Hungarian from Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region. Orban accused Ukrainian draft officers of violently detaining military-aged men as Kyiv struggles to replenish its forces, citing multiple deaths in custody. According to Hungarian officials, Raban was seized from the street despite being previously declared unfit for service due to a lifelong heart condition and later died at a training center near Lviv. Orban announced Hungary would expel Ukrainian officials responsible for forced conscription and reiterated Budapest's opposition to sending weapons to Ukraine, favoring diplomacy with Russia instead. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk warned that his office is in survival mode due to severe funding shortfalls, prompting a $400 million appeal to sustain operations through 2026. The warning follows remarks from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that the United Nations could run out of cash by July. The United States, the UN's largest contributor, has withheld funding from several agencies, citing accountability concerns. Turk said that cuts have reduced staffing, forced program closures in multiple countries, and weakened the global human rights monitoring system. President Trump's renewed push to secure Greenland for U.S. national security strained relations with European allies ahead of the World Economic Forum in Davos, raising fears of a shifting world order. Tensions eased after the United States and NATO reached a framework deal, with Trump dropping tariff threats and ruling out military action. Experts say Greenland's strategic location, Arctic shipping routes, and rare earth resources have elevated its importance amid competition with China and Russia. They expect several years of geopolitical turbulence, but believe the United States will remain the dominant power in a reconfigured global order. A joint European police operation led to the arrest of 2 dockyard contractors accused of sabotaging German naval vessels at the Blum und Voss shipyard in Hamburg. German prosecutors allege a Romanian and a Greek national damaged warships, including pouring abrasive steel shot into the engine of the new corvette Emden, along with other acts such as puncturing water lines and disabling safety systems. Authorities said the sabotage could have caused serious damage or delayed deployments, threatening national security. Investigators have not disclosed a motive, while noting similar sabotage concerns elsewhere in Europe. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing mounting pressure following revelations about former Labour heavyweight Peter Mandelson's past links to Jeffrey Epstein. Reports say Starmer admitted knowing Mandelson maintained contact with Epstein after his conviction, but still supported his appointment as ambassador to Washington.
National relations on one side. I want to make sure this House sees the full documentation, so it will see for itself the extent to which time and time again Mandelson completely misrepresented the extent of his relationship with Epstein and lied throughout the process, including in response to the due diligence.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Right now, somewhere in Nigeria, there's a Christian family being persecuted. Those who are not killed are often forced to flee their homes. At Equipping the Persecuted, they're committed to reaching every affected area and help heal the deep physical and emotional wounds that have been inflicted upon them. But they can't help them without your support. So please visit equippingthepersecuted.org and donate today. Sign up for just $35 a month. It's a little over $1 a day, and you'll help rescue Christians who are suffering and provide security, medical care, food, shelter, and love. The situation is urgent, so I'm asking you to join in the next 10 minutes. It's a life of fear and danger for these Christians, but for just over $1 a day, you can change everything. Go online to equippingthepersecuted.org and make a difference in the life of a persecuted Christian. That's www.equippingthepersecuted.org.
Hi, my name's Michelle Tankey and I'm the volunteer manager at the Lost Dogs Home. We've got 145 incredible volunteers that help us with a wide range of activities, including helping out in the laundry, taking dogs for a walk, doing activities with our enrichment program, administration, gardening, you name it, they're helping us around the shelter. Whether it's blowing bubbles to entertain kittens waiting for adoptions, or even taking a dog for a walk, it's such an incredible positive impact on the animals. Volunteers are so important and special to this shelter because they support us in caring for thousands of animals each year. The impact they have enables us to do far more for the animals than we would be able to. For example, we can get on top of the huge amount of laundry we have. So the volunteers allow us to clean thousands more blankets than we could. It's incredible the amount of gifts that we're given by the public. We're so grateful for it. So if we get some toys, we can give them directly to puppies straight away to play with, or towels, we can take them to our vet hospital for them to use immediately. So it's a really important job to help staff with. I would say to someone who's interested in volunteering to please get in touch. We would love to hear from you. We have an application form on our website that you can fill in, so please just detail all your skills and experience you can offer the shelter, and we'll be in touch when a suitable role comes up.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. I'm Mike Ryan. There's my guest getting ready. We're going to talk about some pretty serious stuff regarding Syria and the persecution and the obliteration of many. Hani Dweik is a Palestinian Jordanian specialist who specializes in communication and advocacy in the field of humanitarian and development sector. He's been living and working in the Middle East and North Africa and Europe, and is very knowledgeable about recent events in Syria and the high levels of violence and fear minority groups that they're all living under. I've got to welcome to our cameras Hani Dweik. Hani, thank you very much for joining us. Tell me, how serious, from what we're told in the West through legacy media, how serious or how distorted are the facts from what really is happening in Syria?
Well, thank you for hosting me. The thing is, what is happening in Syria cannot be taken out of context in the region. And what is happening around the world, the tensions between the US and other parts of the world. Now, what is happening in Syria is not something new. It's been going on for many, many decades. In terms of the country consists of so many ethnic groups, religious groups, and despite the atrocities committed by the previous regime, they managed somehow to keep it united under one entity, regardless of your ethnic or religious group. Now, of course, that doesn't take away the atrocities committed by this regime. But what happened is the alternative is not any better. And the thing is, what happened, and that was the shock, not just to me as a citizen of the region, but also for a lot of people around the world and in the region, is that to see someone who has been proven of committing atrocities and crimes against humanity, and who's been listed in the terrorist list, and all of a sudden, within 24 hours, he's a good guy and he's all right to work with, and that was a bit of a shock for everybody, not just minorities, but also people who were striving for freedom and liberty and diversity, because this person represent oppression, authoritarian ideology. So we are basically replacing a dictatorship with a religious dictatorship. It's not any better. So what happened is, of course, these religious minorities and sexual minorities and other types of minorities, they were fearing for their lives, their livelihoods, and there hasn't been any guarantee so far from the United Nations, European Union, or the United States to protect these minorities on the ground.
Can you? I was going to read you this from just a piece from Tommy Robinson. He says, "I'll reiterate, as the legacy media and politicians are pretending it's not happening, ISIS is back in Syria and committing unimaginable atrocities against minorities as before. I have to ask you, this mass violence, is it worse than it was under? Was it worse under Assad, or is it worse now?
Well, it's not a competition, to be quite honest. But the thing is, what's the use? I mean, the whole point of the revolution, or so-called revolution, back in 2011, is that people were going out to the streets, demanding for freedom, liberty, diversity, inclusion. None of these demands have been put in place now. So that put a question mark on what really happened. Is it just another chapter of dictatorship in the Middle East, or is it just a puppet, or is this person puppet that has been used by the United States and Israel, for that matter? So a lot of people who are non-religious, secular, believes in citizenship of the country, uh, were are worried about what's going on, and there is no, unfortunately, there is no light at the end of the tunnel so far. So it's been only talk, 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 but nothing on the ground happening.
What does the re-emergence of ISIS mean for Syria?
I do believe that ISIS is just a tool. It's just basically it has been. I mean, if you look at the trends since ever it started back in the early 2000s, it has been a tool that's been used by a lot of countries, regionally and globally, to push an agenda. I mean, I'm not talking here about a conspiracy theory. I'm talking about facts on the ground. I mean, Giuliani, he was ISIS. Now, how come he's on the top of the government in Syria, going to the White House, being being hosted by European countries and elsewhere, and your thinking is like, right? I mean, what is the use of international law? What is the use of ICJ, or all these entities that are put in place to serve justice? Means nothing. I mean, and we saw that with the Gaza-Israeli war. What is happening in Syria is all these has been used as tools to benefit in one way or another, one country or another. So again, it's I don't believe that ISIS works in a vacuum. I think ISIS is linked to a lot of countries around the world. They have been used in Iraq, they have been used in Syria and elsewhere. It's just a tool to frighten people. It's like, oh, look at, ISIS is there. They're gonna kill you. They're gonna, and I'm not saying that they're not. They're doing, and they're horrible and they're vicious. But again, where do they buy weapons from? Where do they get their finance? We all know. I mean, we all know how it works, and the fact that people are going around and around this topic is tiring, because we know what ISIS is. We know what ISIS, where ISIS comes from, who financed them, who trained them, who give them the weapons. I mean, all of this we know. I mean, it's not a secret anymore.
Can I ask you? I need to ask you. I'm trying to get my head around this. What parts of Syria does ISIS control at the moment, or is it all over Syria?
No, they're not. I mean, there isn't a specific location that they are controlling, but they are, as you said, they are here and there. And again, because the picture is very blurry in Syria. In northeast, there are the Kurds. In southwest, the Israelis are there. On the north, you've got the Turks. So no one really knows what is like, who is doing what and where. We get all these information from news like everybody else. I have some friends, Syrian friends living there. Sometimes they tell me what's going on, especially the ones who are from minorities. They now live in ghettos. They are scared of moving from one city to another in order to avoid checkpoints, because they don't want to be exposed on these checkpoints with being known through the ID card, the name or the religion, or so they live in these ghettos that they try as much as possible to minimize movement. Fear of ISIS, fear of other militias. It's not just ISIS. ISIS is part of the chaos in Syria. So again, as I said earlier, there hasn't been any guarantee by the US or the EU concerning minorities. They are left alone, to be quite honest.
Syria is, I think it's about 75% Muslim, maybe a little more, and about 10% are Christians. Now, you have Christian friends in Syria. Can you tell me which part of the country they live in, or if you wouldn't mind, and what are they witnessing at the moment?
What are they what? I'm sorry?
Witnessing at the moment. What are they seeing at the moment?
All right. Well, as I said, on the surface it's quiet, but they every now and then they get harassed by so-called lawmakers, but they are militias here and there scattered. There has been reports about kidnappings, asking for ransoms, atrocities committed to certain minorities, especially Alawites, who are connected to the previous regime, since the Al-Assad is an Alawite himself. So it's very tricky. So that's why, as I said earlier, they are trying to minimize movements within the country because they don't want to be exposed. So that's why you have the Druze in the south and southwest who are trying to stick into that region. They don't want to go around because they don't want to be exposed. The same thing with Alawites, the same thing with Christians. And not only that, even Shia Muslims as well, and even Sunni Muslims who are opposing this government, they are being exposed to atrocities. So again, this government did not apply any of the demands that were risen back in 2011 about freedom of expressions, inclusivity, and diversity.
Do you think there'll be a religious cleansing, and that Christians may be exterminated in Syria?
I don't think that. I mean, I don't believe it's going to be like it's. Let me put it this way: it's not going to be a Holocaust.
We have a issue at the moment because we can't say where we're talking to him from, but sometimes intermittent hiccups with the internet signal. So we'll just wait for Hani to get back to us, and he's just connecting now to us, and it's an absolutely atrocious part of atrocious humanity or human catastrophe. That's what I'm looking for. So he still hasn't connected. What we might do is just go to a quick commercial break. If I can just find one quickly. And no, we're back again, which is good.
Yes.
So you were saying, Hani, that you thought that there wouldn't be this mass slaughter of Christians. But can you just tell us? I mean, you mentioned you're sort of very kind about the atrocities and stuff. What are they subjected to, the Christians, or those that that aren't in favour of. And it would seem that with ISIS, nobody really is safe at all.
Well, here's the thing, do we consider the present government as part of ISIS? I'm not sure, because all of a sudden, people in the government, whether Ahmad al-Shara or his ministers, basically they trimmed their beard and they're wearing suits. So is the ideology still there? I think so, but they are also afraid of international reactions. So they are trying to be balanced between what their stance internationally and what is happening on the ground. But the thing is, the problem is a lot of people who were connected to these Islamic or Islamist militias, they have grudge against minorities, because they do believe that minorities were supporting Assad, which is not true. I mean, yes, a lot of them, they were supporting them, but a lot of them were not. Same goes to Sunni Muslims. A lot of the Sunni Muslims were supporting Assad, and a lot of them were against. So it's not a black and white. But as I said earlier, not just Christians, any minorities, what they think now of most of them, or at least the ones I know, that they are thinking of moving out, to immigrate, to go elsewhere, whether to neighboring countries such as Jordan or Lebanon, or to Europe. So, because again, there hasn't been any kind of guarantee given to these minorities by the government, and there should be some kind of pressure from the United States and the European Union on the government regarding minorities.
Are there slave markets, and where are the victims from, and who buys?
I'm sorry?
Are there slave markets? Where are the victims from, and who's buying the slaves?
Slave market? No, I'm not sure there is. I mean, we heard back in I mean, that was probably during ISIS presence in Iraq, that there has been reports of enslaving Yazidis women. But that was back in 2015 in Iraq. In Syria is somehow different. But that doesn't mean that there has been reports on sexual abuses and sexual atrocities against communities there and against minorities. But I'm not sure it is to the level of enslaving. I mean, that's a big word. I'm not quite sure, and I cannot confirm it.
Okay. What about Israel's role in Syria? Are they increasing their territory?
Can you repeat again?
What about Israel's role in Syria? Are they increasing their territory?
Well, what the Israelis are claiming is that they are protecting their northern borders and northeastern borders, which is total nonsense, to be quite honest. It was an excuse for them to expand their territory. I mean, their politicians are not hiding it. They're showing maps of so-called Greater Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates, which includes part of Syria, parts of Jordan, parts of Egypt. So that was an opportunity for them to increase further. And that's why I mentioned earlier that Julani and his cabinet, they are complicit with the Israelis, because all of a sudden they did not fire a single bullet on Israelis while they are fighting other Syrians in the north and the northeast. So the Israelis took this opportunity, the change of regime, the chaos, to expand. They are taking an excuse that they are protecting minorities, they're protecting the Druze, which is just an excuse for them to expand. And they will expand even further. And indicators are showing that they will not stop there. They will go, I mean, in the West Bank, you cannot separate it from what is happening in south of Lebanon and the southwest of Syria. So the Israelis will expand as long as They are taking support from the US and different EU member states.
What about which countries have laid claim to oil, and does the US have an overt presence in Syria?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that correct.
What about the oil? Which countries have laid claim to oil, and does the US have an overt presence in Syria?
Yes, northeast Syria is a rich region of oil, and that's why where there has been a lot of clashes between the Syrian Kurds and the Syrian government. What I understood is that there is an American presence nearby the oil reserves there in order to protect the oil export trade from in and out of Syria. So yes, that's one of the reasons why there are clashes in that region, in that area, because it's rich in oil.
It's can you just tell me, because we are now running out of time, and we will open the invitation again to you, Hani. Tell me where you see Syria ending up, because you are very well informed and you know pretty precisely what's happening. Where do you see the future of Syria?
It's to be quite honest, it's very, very gloomy. What I see, how I see it is there. I want to compare it to Afghanistan in a way, even though it's not Afghanistan, different circumstances. But I want to compare in what happened back in the 80s when the US and Saudi Arabia supported Al Mujahideen to the point where Osama bin Laden was described as a freedom fighter, because back then he was fighting the Soviets. The same people, 10 years later, they were considered terrorists. So, and vice versa. So it's the same thing here. All of a sudden, these people who were considered as terrorists, now they are in government. They are good guys. I don't know how, and they are being dealt with as okay. This is the reality for people to accept. Now, what will happen? I'm not quite sure. I'm not optimistic. I would love to, but it's not looking good. You have all these fractions fighting. You don't have clear laws. You don't have a just constitution. I mean, reading at the constitution, what is supposed to be a constitution. It's a joke what is happening. There is no sovereignty in a way. I mean, Giuliani and his cabinet, they don't really control much of Syria. You have the Kurds in the northeast, the Turks in the north, the Russians in the west, the Israelis in the south. Syria is basically a battlefield for whoever wants to go in there. So you have regional and global powers in Syria. So I don't see Syria being a stable country for the next, let's say, 10 years at least.
They're very depressing, isn't it? Look,
Yes.
I have to thank you so much for your time. I know this took some work. I appreciate it. And the invitation is open because we need to discuss this on a regular basis,
Yes.
and not just follow the line of legacy media and what our governments tell us. We actually need to know the truth. Hani Joik, if you do you have any socials? I mean, it's a stupid question, by the way, but I want to ask you, or if somebody wants to find out more about the truth of what's happening in Syria, are there any other ways of finding out?
I would advise people to go into social media. There and bloggers, and there are some influencers or people on the ground who are not connected to news channels, not connected. That they are reporting from their neighborhoods, from the cities and villages. And there has been a lot of Syrians who basically courageously reporting about what is happening there. And of course, major media outlets, they do report, but unfortunately, major media outlets, everyone has their own agenda. And sometimes you get lost as a spectator. You get lost. It's like whom to believe. And in the wake of what happened in Gaza and now Syria, there has been a lot of reports from inside, from people who are living there, living their daily lives and reporting about what is happening. So I encourage people to do their research. There are tons of people on the internet who are reporting with their videos and interviews. And of course, some of them are misleading, but when you do your research here and there, you can have a better understanding of what is happening in Syria.
I appreciate your time, and thank you so much. Hani, he's also a humanitarian worker and truly a remarkable person. And we'll do more of these conversations, because that's what we need to do, is talk about it. This is The World Today.
Surprisingly, the blueprint for transformation is woven into the United Nations Agenda 2030, ostensibly a vision for a better world.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I say again that taken together, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement provide humanity with a master plan for a sustainable way of life on this planet.
New York City, late September 2024, the setting for the United Nations Summit of the Future, a gathering of member nations to reinforce and accelerate Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The plan has a broad spectrum and is full of worthy ambition. But behind those deliberately bright and colourful boxes lies a darker theme, a shifting of influence and potentially power towards unelected world bodies. The strategy goes back well into the last century, and pressure is growing, because the goals are far behind targets set at the grand relaunching in 2015.
17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Our aim is clear, our mission is possible, and our destination is in our sights.
To end poverty and hunger, address inequality, protect our planet, and build a life of dignity for all.
It appears to be a noble and ambitious programme for a perfect world. And who could argue with those aspirations? But critics insist the goals are not what they seem. Alex Newman is a journalist and broadcaster who's been investigating the issue for 15 years. He has his own way of interpreting the rhetoric.
You have to learn to speak what I call UNEs. You have to know what the terms mean if you want to truly understand what is being discussed. When they talk about peacekeeping forces or the peacekeeping role of the United Nations, they're actually talking about the war-making capabilities of the United Nations. So you have this Orwellian doublespeak. When they talk about transparency, more often than not, they're talking about eliminating your privacy. Human rights is another very, very good example. They make very clear in this document that your rights can be restricted under the guise of public order or morality or whatever the case may be. And so they're saying, here's your rights, but by the way, they're not really rights. We can revoke them at any time. The UN is filled with contradictions like this. Like, for example, when they talk about gender equality, right? A normal person in the Western world thinks gender equality means a woman has a right to earn money, to own property, to have all the rights and privileges that a man would have. When you look at the individuals who lead this movement within the UN, you're talking about radical feminists. You're talking about people who are very interested in dissolving the nuclear family. As you dig into these goals, it's very clear we're dealing with something far more nefarious. Once you look past the marketing slogans, the kind of warm and fuzzy, we're going to end hunger, which again is just window dressing, you realize that this is actually a blank check for totalitarian global control.
Author and campaigner, the late Rosa Koire, called out the plan more than a decade ago.
It is the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world. But it's far more than that. It's a blueprint. It is the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all information, all energy, all means of production, and all human beings in the world.
Not the station for people who label truth as misinformation just because they don't like it.
For facts and truth.
Today's News Talk. The World Today.
And welcome back for our final leg on the world today. At 22.9 in the UK, 22.7 in Queensland and Cairns, which is part of Queensland, and 22 to 8, New South Wales and Victoria. Rada Sterling is a leading human rights advocate, crisis manager, and policy consultant focusing on the UAE and the wider Middle East. She's the founder and CEO of British-based organisation Detained in Dubai, which has helped almost 20,000 victims of injustice over the past 13 plus years. Due Process International and IPEX, which is Interpol and Extradition Reform. Rada also hosts the Gulf Injustice podcast. We're going to talk today about the recent dump of Epstein documents by the US administration. The volume of information dumped, that's the operative word, is extraordinary, as was the scale and shocking implications of this one man's legacy. What a legacy. Despite this, it's hard to believe that only one associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, is behind bars. Perhaps the fallout has begun, starting with Lord Mandelson, and it could bring down PM Starmer. Now, Europeans mentioned in the Epstein files are being fired or forced to resign. Poland and Lithuania opened an official investigation. So did North Macedonia. More European countries may follow in the upcoming days. As of today, the biggest kingpins behind Epstein's web of crime remain inoculated. First of all, Rada, thanks for joining us. We need to put the microphone on. We have no sound. And the look of panic it sets in. It's a terrible thing. No, we still can't hear. What I might do is just go to a very quick break and we'll try and fix this up. This, by the way, is The World Today.
Growing up, my father enjoyed a drink. It was just part of our culture. So you might have started drinking at 15 or 16, and so then it's just a slippery slope.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk.
Okay, we're back again. Rada, we have sound, I believe.
Excellent. That's what we need.
Excellent. I mean, isn't it intriguing? I mean, you're a British-based human rights advocate and all the good stuff, and you're in Cairns enjoying the beautiful weather. I'm sure that the good folk of the UK right now, at 18 away from 9, and I believe it's pelting down with rain in most parts of the UK. They'll be sending you really mean messages because you're enjoying a bit of rain, but it's magnificent up in Cairns. You've got the Whit Sundays, you've got Port Douglas, and fantastic part of the world. Tell me about Epstein. What do you make of his of these documents?
You know, it's so complex that it's almost, you know, you have to ask, is there some sort of a further deep state, a shadow government, or this quid pro quo influence ring that's running so deep? I don't think we can even understand it from the document dump that we've seen so far. And I look forward to spending a good long amount of time trying to uncover what is happening here. What are the implications? I think, you know, if we look at Keir Starmer potentially, you know, so either having to resign or being forced out, it almost begs the question, well, why wasn't that the case before when we're talking about the the rape gangs in the UK, this is just another extension of that. And then we start asking, is there any accountability? We have these rings of human trafficking, of the abuse of women, or some of them voluntary, some of them involuntary or coerced. And these are the people that we're entrusting to run our governments, to be in our House of Lords, to be in charge of huge, massive, influential companies that are working with our governments. I mean, we look at Bill Gates. I have to say, I was happy to see some consequences for Bill Gates, because I think he's been acting like God. I think he's been acting so immune, and the fact that they've been able to get away with a hell of a lot without ever being brought to account just emboldens further. And I hope that people, when they think of Bill Gates now, maybe they won't want his genetically engineered mosquitoes and his fake meat and whatever other product he's trying to sell our government and trying to get us to pay for through taxpayer money. So I hope that there's going to be some consequences beyond just exposure and accountability for those specific crimes. I hope it does have that ongoing impact and changes things, wakens people up. I hope we investigate what's been going on with this planned pandemic, which we all kind of know about now, but it would be good to see that truly investigated and for some genuine reports to come out, rather than future generations learning that it was this scandemic in 50 years, 60 years, 80 years. We want to know now.
The media, and it's a great distraction. When everybody has been like, oh wow, he was involved with some very, very grubby and probably highly illegal activities, but we don't know that just yet. But the redactions, they were thinking that it's to protect Mr. X and all these, for doing terrible things. I put it to you that maybe these redactions have been to protect others in much more serious crimes, such as crimes in partnerships with other countries. If you look at the Secrets Act, I'm sure Mandelson's going to receive a fairly hefty sentence because he shared secrets. And so I'm just thinking sure, it's great to, or not great, but it's convenient to throw up the sexual undertones and overtones, and Bill Gates, he also enjoyed one of those occurrences that he contracted a terrible disease, and the Russians did it. See, and
no, there's an operation.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we got him. But I'm just thinking, though, do you think that it goes much deeper than what we're seeing? And government's very good at doing that, create the distraction and look at what's bubbling on the surface, but you need to go down deep and have a look at what's happening below the surface. And that's where I think the alarming things will be. Forget about the personal things at this stage. Look at the dealings with foreign powers. Look at the Secrets Act of any country being busted. This guy had his finger in every pie. He had the ideal vehicle to get what he wanted. It's called blackmail.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you have ex-intelligence officers on the one hand saying it's probably not blackmail because it would just so easily end the first time that you did any official blackmail, which I tend to think is probably accurate. But I think there's an underlying blackmail, isn't there? If you do something wrong and your friend knows about it, you know that at any time they could hold that over you in some way or another. They could expose you, they could report you. So yes, I think there's blackmail without even being overt about it. Like, it's just known, and that when you trust someone with a secret, that at any time in the future, if you have a falling out, that secret could get exposed. So it's sort of blackmail by default. But I think the big element here that needs to be looked at is the quid pro quo. The influence that they are going to get, the plans that they can come up with and implement, whether it's a globalist agenda, whether it's extracting money through a pandemic or through some other, climate change fiasco, climate change this or that, and just by deceiving the public. And I think that needs to be looked at, and absolutely the foreign influence, because I don't believe that it's just Russia and that we should focus on Russia as a demon here. It is going to be so wide. It's going to involve everyone from Israel to China to Russia to anyone who has an interest. And that's pretty much all the world stage, all of our competitors in particular, and possibly even elements of the US government themselves, which I absolutely would expect to uncover if there was any sort of a possible deep dive without ramifications for people, because it's going to expose a lot. And I'm not sure if we're going to be able to find out all of that information without true inquiries and open inquests. And I think that'll be difficult. We're going to have to rely on some deep diving journalists at this point, I'd say. And you're right that the sex element of it can just be a distraction, and we can't just focus on that. We need to see what kind of influence these people have had over the whole world, and what are the consequences for that have been. And there need to be lawsuits as we dig deeper. We need to be able to hold people to account in different ways, because I think through the discoveries as a result of these lawsuits, we'll find out a lot more than we will just through document dumps. And so far, there hasn't been a lot, from where these documents lead us. We would assume there would be a lot more. There'd be a lot more investigation. I'd say, all of the different departments of the US are going to have bits and pieces of information, and we're not going to see them come together without some sort of a collaboration and an investigation in that way.
I've never seen so many redactions, some pages, for example, like this one. This was released. I mean, it's one of my mouse pads, but the point being, actually, more use too than those pages. But why would you release thousands of pages? I mean, by the way, I think there are about 3 million pages. So there are some great, or not great, but there are very important secrets or information is embedded in those documents, and many of those we can't see. Why do you think do you think it was just to protect the victims with all these redactions, or do you think it was more to protect the guilty?
I think it's potentially going to have to do with the redactions might be of high-profile people from other countries, and that's possibly can be covered under national security issues that can allow them to redact. I do not think it's just for victims. I mean, they released a lot of the victims' names, by the way, so I really don't think it's too much care for the victims at this point. I think it is to keep confidential some of the VIP names that would be on that list, some of the foreign governments, possibly diplomats, people that they want to protect and that they have an ongoing relationship with, I'd say, and that may have more information that they want to investigate.
Yeah, some of the names just recently, and it's sending all the tabloids nuts, and even bringing the Russians into it, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. But we have Lord Mandelson, we have Tony Blair's been mentioned in the dispatches. Well, even Nigel Farage has been mentioned, of course, ex-Prince Andrew.
Yes.
I mean, and they're all calling for their blood. And about Kevin Rudd. I didn't do it, but Kevin Rudd mentioned it too. So Epstein had this great, like an octopus. He was everywhere. His network was just fantastic for a networker. The amount of secrets, though, that he must have. What do you think will happen, for example, with the British government? Because we have Starmer. There was no due process when Mandelson became the ambassador to the US. Obviously, he had a few things in the closet that didn't come out until just recently with Epstein. Obviously the security background checks and stuff weren't all that secure or weren't all that good. Do you think this will impact the UK government to an extent that it may bring on maybe an election?
That's hopeful. I think that there should have been an election quite some time ago, to be fair. especially after all of the scandals that we've seen. I hope it does. And I think that people are fed up. I think that, people were so angry about these grooming gangs already. And then to add this, it's just so dirty. And it's just, it's like when during the pandemic, when they had all of their parties in Westminster, that was just tasteless. It left just such a terrible taste in people's mouths. And I think the same is happening here. And the Epstein, it's just too much. They're already unhappy with the economy, the climate in England. People are walking around miserable. They can't afford many things, and Labour's saying, "Well, we'll give you a little. We'll try to pass something to give you a little rent relief." Well, that's not good enough. That's not going to solve the economic problems. You've got so many wealthy people leaving the country. Now you throw this onto it as well. Like you're a sex scandalist. You're supporting and hiding and sheltering sex offenders, essentially, is the perception, whether it's true or not. Whether, the woman that Lord Mandelson was with was underage or not, it's irrelevant. It's scandalous. That image says too much to the British public. They don't want to see this man anywhere near as a convicted sex offender in his underwear. And with a woman with a redacted face, which obviously makes him look even more guilty, these redactions. So possibly that's it. But I think when you combine all of that people are generally unhappy with the climate in the UK, with the economy, with everything that's been, the lies that the British government has been, conducting. They're not telling us who's committing crimes, the demographics. They're not allowed to talk about it. We've got censorship. We've got people being thrown in prison over a tweet or a social media post. Now we've got these investigations in Congress in the US uncovering their attempts to censor true information. We've got them targeting Elon Musk and X. And then to couple it, now to top it all off, now we've got this, deep relationship with Epstein, with the House of Lords, and it's too much, I would say. And I think that Keir Starmer is at serious risk at this point, and he should be.
Yeah, I totally agree with you too. I can see on Craig's list or something like that, and ex-Prince Andrew will have room available for those caught. And so maybe Mandelson will be sharing the house. I mean, look at Fergie too. I mean,
he might need a large chateau, I'd say. House them all.
I shouldn't even say that. But if you look at COVID and those that were held accountable, I think it was about zero. Do you think these people, once caught having suffered the embarrassment, do you think they'll be held accountable?
It's really difficult, isn't it? I think that the public increasingly in America is fed up with the lack of account and really disheartened. And that's why it's been, I think, really important for the Trump administration to show that something's going to happen there. Whether it's Fauci, whether it's Bill Gates, people need to see something happen, I think, because it is depressing. And I think even more so in the UK, we're definitely not seeing accountability. We might see a resignation. That's about the extent of it. And, sometimes we don't even get an apology. So for this, their next move will be, how do we change the narrative? How do we change the talking points in the media as soon as possible? And that will happen. And people they don't have short memories that much anymore because it keeps coming up. We have access to the internet now, but it's like when the whole conversation moves on and the media supports that conversation moving on, then you have a problem. Then you have people just saying, well, I guess we didn't get anywhere. And they'll have to consider that when they vote next. And that's very important. And I think, young men and people who typically don't vote as actively need to take that into account, need to understand that inaction is apathy, and that's not something traditionally that men were. They fought for their freedom, they fought for their politics, for their religion, for everything. So, when you only have a small demographic who's willing to even go down and vote, and then you have people becoming sad and apathetic, and all they're doing is protesting, they need to ensure that they take that fire and do actually take it to the voting office, and also speak to the media. Stop buying these papers that are covering up these kind of crimes and supporting the government to that. You've got to vote with your money as well. Don't support Netflix if you don't like their content. We really have to get a little bit more activist about what we want. And things do change. I mean, look at the US. You can see quite a lot of changes. There's no way we would have seen these millions of documents. And we might say there's probably more documents, but we never would have seen this, except that we demanded it. So we can see now we make demands and they do get met, but we have to be pretty aggressive when we push and lobby for them.
How do you think Trump will come out of this? I mean, he did release the documents. A lot of them redacted, so waste of paper. But he did release them. And there's could you imagine being an editor going through 3 million documents? Give me a break.
Yes. I think he'll come out of it fine. I think it's probably, I think he would have fought harder to redact and to not release them if there was a significant amount that is going to damage him. Most of it, the damage is going to be, I think, from just random headlines, and that's probably just from media that already hates him anyway. So the impact on his voter base might be quite small. There hasn't been any criminal allegation against him, so I don't really know. I mean, I know that obviously people are hoping that there will be something in there, but I don't think it would have been released if there were, because it'd possibly be a matter of national security at that point. Furthermore, I think he has a really good point when he says if there was something in there against me, if I'd committed some crime or I'd been involved in something nefarious, there is not a chance in hell that he wouldn't have been prosecuted for that already. And I 100% believe that. I think if there was anything, my biggest issue, I think, with the Epstein files is that anything that was of interest in there against certain Democrats was probably removed. Because that's the most likely scenario, as far as I'm concerned, is that sort of meddling. Because we saw a lot of criminality with covering up crimes, with just that boldness and just being confident enough to do things that you wouldn't expect that they would do. So, if anything, any really truly important files have probably already been taken, seized, and put in the intelligence agencies, and we'll never see them.
One wonders if that's an oxymoron, the intelligence agency. Sorry, I'm being quite rude. Rada, always a pleasure. Just quickly, what are you doing for the weekend? Just tease the people.
Well, I've been starting every day with a nice swim, sometimes in the rain, and enjoying the beautiful weather, and I'll have to put on the air conditioning. But I will be back in England very soon. So,
you poor thing. Oh, well.
It's great talking to you.
I think the summers up in Cairns are magnificent. Bit of
They
rain
are.
doesn't hurt anybody. They're lovely, and then a Chardonnay in the evening.
Well, that's a very good idea. It is Friday night.
Don't stop because of me. Rada Sterling, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Can just come on to radasterling.com.
That's pretty straightforward. Enjoy the tipple tonight, and it was lovely chatting. For those in the UK, well, can't do much about it. Enjoy the rain. This has been The World Today and the Protagonists earlier on. Thank you so much for your time. We'll be back again on Monday. We have some news coming up soon. We just have to get through a few more hoops, but we have some very good news, we think. Maybe next week we can announce it. This has been The World Today. Thank you very much.